Autumn winds carried whispers through the ancient pines of Ironwood territory as Alpha King Thorn tracked a large buck through the forest depths. His silver-streaked black hair caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy, while his ice-blue eyes remained fixed on the trail. At 40, Thorn had ruled his pack for 15 years, his powerful frame still in its prime despite the weight of leadership etched into the lines of his face. The forest had always been his sanctuary, the only place where the voices of responsibility grew quiet enough for him to hear his own thoughts. Yet today, even in these sacred woods, peace eluded him. The buck's trail led deeper into the misty heart of the forest, where the oldest trees stood sentinel. These ancient pines had witnessed the rise and fall of many Alpha Kings, including Thorn's father, Alaric, whose lessons on sacrifice and duty still echoed in his son's mind. As Thorn paused beside a massive oak, the wind shifted, carrying not just the scent of his prey, but something else, a presence both familiar and ethereal. The forest around him stilled, the chattering birds fell silent. Even the rustling leaves ceased their eternal dance as a cold sensation crawled up Thorn's spine. He was not alone. Turning slowly, Thorn faced the clearing behind him where a translucent figure materialized among the trees. The spectral image of his father, Alaric, just as he had appeared in life, proud and regal in his alpha form. Thorn dropped to one knee, a gesture of respect he had performed countless times in life. Though 15 years had passed since his father's death, the spiritual connection between alpha bloodlines and the sacred forest remained unbroken. The spirits of former alphas lingered in these woods, guardians and advisors to their descendants, appearing only in times of great importance or impending danger. Alaric's spirit approached, his footfalls making no sound on the forest floor. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, resonating directly in Thorn's mind rather than traveling through air. "The time approaches, my son. The prophecy unfolds." The spectral figure's eyes glowed with ancient knowledge. "Remember my final warning. The white wolf brings either salvation or destruction to our pack. You must choose wisely when the moment comes." Thorn's jaw tightened. The prophecy had haunted him for 15 years, a riddle with no answer. "How will I know this white wolf, father? How can I ensure I make the right choice?" Alaric's form began to fade, returning to the spiritual realm from which he had emerged. "You will know by the soul bond. Trust what the moon goddess reveals to you, not what others would have you believe." With those cryptic words, the apparition dissolved into mist, leaving Thorn alone once more in the silent forest. The hunting forgotten, he rose to his feet, his mind churning with questions and foreboding. Each time his father's spirit appeared, change and challenge followed. Something momentous approached. He could feel it in his bones, in his blood, in the restlessness of his wolf that paced anxiously within his human form. Miles away, at the edge of Ironwood territory, Lila moved silently through the pack nursery, her steps light and practiced in their effort to remain unnoticed. At 23, she had perfected the art of invisibility, keeping her platinum blonde hair in a simple braid rather than the elaborate styles favored by other Omegas, wearing plain dresses in muted colors that helped her blend into backgrounds, and keeping her unusually pale blue eyes downcast to avoid drawing attention to their striking color against her porcelain skin. Being invisible had become both her shield and her prison. As the only surviving member of the Moonshade lineage, a fact known only to her and her late grandmother, Lila carried a burden of secrecy that isolated her from the pack around her. Her grandmother had taught her from childhood that their bloodline must remain hidden, that the gift of soul bonding that ran through their veins made them both precious and hunted. The nursery offered her sanctuary. Among the pack's children, Lila could use a fraction of her abilities without raising suspicion. Her natural talent for soothing troubled young ones was attributed to a gentle personality rather than the ancient moonshade magic that allowed her to sense and heal emotional wounds. Today, she sat cross-legged on the floor, singing softly to a circle of toddlers, while her mind drifted to the approaching selection ceremony that had the entire pack buzzing with excitement. After 5 years of widowhood, Alpha Thorn would finally choose a new Luna. 12 eligible Omegas had been selected as potential matches, and though Lila had received no invitation, her grandmother's final wish before passing 6 months ago had been for Lila to attend. "Your destiny awaits there," the old woman had whispered, her withered hand clutching Lila's with surprising strength. "The time has come for the moonshade line to emerge from shadow." Lila had argued against it. Exposure meant danger. For generations, her family had lived quietly, avoiding the attention that had once led to the near extinction of their bloodline. But her grandmother had been insistent, revealing in her final hours that Lila's mother, who died in childbirth, had received a vision of her daughter standing beside the Alpha King, their union healing ancient wounds and breaking the curse that had shadowed both bloodlines for centuries. Sleep had become elusive since that revelation. Each night, Lila's dreams were plagued by visions of fire and blood, of ancestors fleeing through moonlit forests as shadows pursued them, of a dark presence that consumed the hearts of wolves who should have been protectors. These were not merely dreams, but memories passed through bloodlines, warnings embedded in her very cells. As the day's nursery session ended and the children returned to their families, Lila remained behind to straighten the room, her movements mechanical as her thoughts churned. Tomorrow's ceremony loomed before her like an approaching storm. Despite her grandmother's certainty, every instinct urged her to run, to disappear into the vast wilderness beyond pack territory rather than step into the spotlight her family had avoided for generations. A sharp knock interrupted her thoughts. Martha, the head caretaker, stood in the doorway, her round face creased with its perpetual expression of mild disapproval. "Lila, the ceremonial robes have arrived for tomorrow's participants. Yours is the third package." Lila's head snapped up, surprise momentarily overriding her careful control. "There must be some mistake. I never submitted my name." Martha's eyebrows rose. "The council added your name specifically, something about honoring your grandmother's position before her passing." She thrust a package wrapped in fine cloth toward Lila. "Be at the ceremonial grounds by sundown tomorrow. Do not be late. The Alpha King values punctuality." The door closed behind Martha before Lila could form a coherent response. Alone once more, she unwrapped the package with trembling hands, revealing a ceremonial gown of pale silver that would accentuate her unusual coloring rather than minimize it. A note nestled among the folds of fabric caught her attention, its official seal marking it as coming directly from the council. "By order of the High Council, Lila Moonshade is hereby commanded to participate in the selection ceremony as the representative of her bloodline. Absence will be considered an act of defiance against pack law." The use of her true family name, a name she had never used publicly, sent ice through her veins. Someone knew, someone had recognized what her grandmother had spent a lifetime concealing. And now that knowledge had become a trap from which she could not escape. Across the territory, in the imposing stone structure that housed the pack's leadership, Elder Blackwood moved through shadowed corridors with purpose. At 70, his once powerful frame had grown lean, but no less intimidating, his silver hair and beard adding gravitas to his position as head of the council. Outwardly, he presented himself as Thorne's most trusted advisor, a pillar of wisdom and tradition. Few knew of his true allegiance to the Black Vein Council, the secret society that had worked for centuries to control the pack's destiny from the shadows. Blackwood entered the council's private chamber where 5 others awaited, their faces illuminated by firelight as they sat around a table carved with ancient symbols. Each represented one of the 6 founding families that had formed alliances through blood rituals centuries ago, binding their descendants to a pact of power. "The Moonshade girl will attend tomorrow," Blackwood announced without preamble. "I've ensured she had no choice in the matter." Counselor Miriam, a sharp-featured woman whose family controlled much of the pack's wealth, leaned forward. "Are you certain she is the one? The last of their line?" Blackwood nodded, satisfaction evident in his cold eyes. "Her energy signature is unmistakable, stronger than any Moonshade in generations. The fool girl doesn't even realize what she carries within her." "And what of the Alpha? He must not select her." This from Counselor Reed, whose nervous fingers betrayed his anxiety despite his forceful tone. "I've spent 5 years preparing him for this moment," Blackwood replied, his voice tinged with contempt. "Since his wife's unfortunate accident, I've cultivated his reliance on political alliances. He believes his duty to the pack requires a strategically advantageous match. The Redwood Pack's daughter, Cassidy, has been prepared to captivate him. Her bloodline is strong enough to be acceptable, yet diluted enough to be controllable." The eldest counselor, a man so ancient that his name had been forgotten in favor of the simple title, the Keeper, spoke in a rasping whisper. "Do not underestimate fate's hand in this. The Moonshade line has defied extinction before, and the prophecy speaks clearly. If the White Wolf and the Alpha King unite, our hold will be broken." Blackwood's expression hardened. "Prophecies can be rewritten through decisive action. I eliminated Sophia when she began asking dangerous questions, and I will eliminate this girl if necessary. Tomorrow's ceremony will proceed as planned. The Alpha will reject the Moonshade girl and choose our candidate. Within a lunar cycle, the binding will be complete, and our influence will be secured for another generation." The council members nodded in solemn agreement, unaware that their secretive meeting had been observed. Outside the chamber, pressed against the ancient stone wall, a young pack warrior named Caleb held his breath, his enhanced hearing capturing every damning word. As personal guard to Thorne's eldest son, Logan, Caleb had stumbled upon the meeting by chance while retrieving a toy the boy had left in a rarely used corridor. What he'd heard turned his blood cold. The implications were staggering: the council's betrayal, the orchestrated death of Luna Sophia, the manipulation of their Alpha, and a prophecy that could change everything. Keeping his movements silent, Caleb retreated from his hiding place, his mind racing with the knowledge he now carried and the danger it represented. Dawn broke clear and cold on the day of the selection ceremony, painting the Ironwood territory in hues of gold and amber. Thorne stood on the balcony of his chambers, watching his pack prepare for the evening's events with a sense of resignation rather than anticipation. 5 years had passed since Sophia's death during what should have been a routine border patrol. 5 years of raising 4 children alone while managing the complex political landscape of pack relationships. The council had been insistent that the time had come for him to choose a new Luna, arguing that the pack needed stability and that alliances required strengthening through strategic unions. Thorne had resisted for as long as possible, unwilling to replace the woman who, while not his true mate, had been a trusted partner and devoted mother. His relationship with Sophia had been arranged, a political match that had served both their packs well. They had built genuine respect and companionship over time, had produced 4 beautiful children together, but the mate bond, that rare and sacred connection created by the moon goddess herself, had never formed between them. In the private moments before her death, Sophia had encouraged him to find that connection, to experience what their arranged marriage had denied them both. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Caleb entered, his young face uncharacteristically grave. As one of the few guards Thorne trusted implicitly, Caleb had earned the privilege of direct access to the Alpha. "My king, I must speak with you urgently, in private." Something in the young warrior's tone sent a ripple of alarm through Thorne. He nodded toward his private study, a soundproofed room where even enhanced wolf hearing could not penetrate the walls. Once the door closed behind them, Caleb recounted what he had overheard: the Black Vein Council's existence, their generations of manipulation, their role in Sophia's death, and their plans for tonight's ceremony. With each revelation, Thorne's rage built, a physical pressure that made the air around him vibrate with suppressed energy. "Sophia was investigating them before she died," Caleb finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "She discovered something in the pack histories about the Moonshade line and the prophecy. The council feared she would share this information with you." Thorne's hands curled into fists, his knuckles white with strain. "Why come to me now, hours before the ceremony? Why not when you first learned of this?" Caleb met his Alpha's gaze steadily. "Because I needed proof, not just overheard conversations. Last night I found these in Luna Sophia's old journals, hidden in a compartment in the nursery wall." He pulled several folded papers from his jacket, documents yellowed with age and covered in Sophia's elegant script. She was compiling evidence against the council, and she was particularly interested in one Omega named Lila. The name triggered something primal in Thorne's consciousness. Lila? I don't recall an Omega by that name. She works in the nursery, keeps to herself. Apparently, she's the last of the Moonshade line, a family most believe died out generations ago. According to Luna Sophia's notes, they were hunted nearly to extinction because of their unique abilities and connection to an ancient prophecy. Thorne unfolded the papers, scanning his late wife's writings. Sophia had documented a systematic erasure of the Moonshade family from official pack histories, noting that their gift of soul bonding, the ability to heal spiritual wounds and connect with the deepest parts of another wolf's nature, made them both valued and feared. More disturbing was her discovery that the Black Vein Council had been specifically targeting Moonshades for centuries, seeing them as the only threat to their control. The final page contained a passage Sophia had transcribed from a text so old its origins were lost to time. When the last white wolf bonds with the Alpha King, the shadow that feeds on hearts shall be vanquished, and the Ironwood Pack will enter an age of unprecedented strength. But should the white wolf be rejected, darkness will consume all, leaving only ash where mighty trees once stood. The white wolf from his father's warning, the prophecy that had haunted him for 15 years, suddenly had context, a potential face. Thorne looked up from the documents, his decision crystallizing with cold clarity. "The ceremony proceeds as planned," he said finally. "But we play a different game than the council expects. Tell no one of this conversation. Not yet." As twilight approached, Lila stood among 11 other Omegas in an antechamber adjacent to the ceremonial grounds, her heart thundering against her ribs like a caged bird seeking escape. The silver gown they had provided fit her perfectly, its shimmering fabric catching the light with every nervous breath. Unlike the other candidates who had spent hours preparing, Lila had simply braided her platinum hair in its usual style, refusing to play fully into the spectacle despite being unable to avoid it entirely. The other Omegas ignored her, focused on their own aspirations and the potential life-changing moment ahead. Most came from prominent families or allied packs, each representing political advantages that would benefit the Ironwood Pack through their union with Thorne. Lila alone stood without connections or influence, her presence an anomaly that made no political sense. A pack elder entered the chamber, his ceremonial robes marking him as the ritual's officiant. "The time has come. You will enter the sacred circle one by one, approaching the Alpha King with proper deference. He will scent each candidate to determine compatibility. If the Moon Goddess has blessed your union with a mate bond, it will be known in that moment." Lila's anxiety spiked. The scenting ritual would bring her into close proximity with Thorne, close enough for her moonshade abilities to activate involuntarily. If a bond existed, there would be no hiding it, not from him, not from the council, not from anyone present. The candidates proceeded out to the ceremonial grounds where hundreds of pack members gathered around a circular clearing illuminated by blazing torches. At the circle's center stood Alpha Thorne, resplendent in ceremonial leathers adorned with ancient pack symbols, his commanding presence causing a hush to fall over the assembled wolves. One by one, the Omegas approached him, each interaction following the same pattern: a respectful bow, Thorne's careful scenting near their neck, and a cordial but clearly unbonded acknowledgement before they moved aside. As each candidate completed the ritual without success, a subtle tension built in the crowd. The selection of a Luna was critical to the pack's future, and the absence of a mate bond would mean another politically arranged match rather than one blessed by the Moon Goddess. Finally, only Lila remained. Her legs felt leaden as she stepped into the circle, aware of hundreds of curious eyes watching her approach the Alpha King. She kept her gaze lowered as protocol demanded, though she could feel Thorne's intense focus upon her from the moment she entered his space. When she reached the appropriate distance, Lila sank into the formal bow of an Omega to an Alpha. her silver gown pooling around her like moonlight on water. She remained there, head bent, waiting for Thorn to complete the ritual so this ordeal could end. Several heartbeats passed in silence, longer than with any previous candidate. "Rise," Thorn commanded finally, his deep voice carrying easily across the hushed gathering. Lila obeyed, still keeping her gaze lowered as she straightened. Tradition dictated that she remain in place while Thorn approached for the scenting, but instead he closed the distance between them with deliberate steps until barely inches separated them. From the corner of her eye, Lila could see Elder Blackwood shift uncomfortably at this deviation from protocol. "Look at me," Thorn said quietly, a request meant only for her ears. Startled by the unexpected command, Lila raised her pale blue eyes to meet his ice-blue gaze. The moment their eyes locked, a jolt of recognition passed between them. Ancient, primal, undeniable. Lila felt her carefully constructed walls crumble as the moonshade gift activated without her conscious control, creating a momentary bridge between their innermost selves. In that suspended moment, she sensed the complexity of Thorn's spirit, his strength and integrity, but also the shadows of manipulation that had surrounded him for years without his knowledge. Thorn's expression remained impassive, though his pupils dilated noticeably. He leaned forward to complete the scenting ritual, his face moving alongside her neck, where her pulse fluttered wildly beneath her skin. When his breath touched her, Lila had to stifle a gasp as energy coursed between them, the unmistakable signature of a true mate bond beginning to form. Time seemed to stop. In that suspended moment, Lila glimpsed fragments of possibility, a future where light conquered shadow, where ancient wounds healed, where the Ironwood Pack thrived under leadership uncorrupted by darkness. She saw their children, carriers of both bloodlines, stronger than either had been alone. Then, without warning, Thorn stepped back. His face had hardened into a mask of cool indifference as he turned to address the crowd, his voice ringing clear across the ceremonial grounds. "No bond here. Next candidate." The words struck Lila like physical blows. She stood frozen in shock, unable to reconcile what she had felt with what Thorn had declared. The mate bond had begun forming. She had felt it, knew it with the certainty of her moonshade heritage. Yet he had denied it publicly, rejected not just her, but a sacred connection bestowed by the moon goddess herself. Elder Blackwood stepped forward smoothly. "There are no more candidates, Alpha King. Perhaps none of tonight's selections were suitable." Thorn's expression remained unreadable. "Indeed. The Council has recommended Cassidy of the Redwood Pack as a potential match for some time. Perhaps wisdom lies in political alliance rather than waiting for a bond that may never materialize." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The rejection of all 12 candidates was unprecedented, as was the immediate pivot toward a specific political match. Tradition called for reflection between selection and arrangement, yet Thorn appeared to be accelerating the process. Lila stood forgotten at the circle's edge, her body numb with shock and humiliation. When she finally managed to move, her steps were unsteady as she retreated from the ceremonial grounds, slipping away from the gathering without anyone noticing her departure. Only when she reached the safety of her small cottage at the territory's edge did the full weight of what had happened crash over her. The mate bond had begun forming, unmistakably, powerfully, and Thorn had rejected it, had rejected her, the very thing her grandmother had foreseen. The destiny she had been promised had crumbled to ash in a single moment of public denial. As the first tears fell, Lila's grief was interrupted by a series of rapid knocks at her door. When she opened it, she found Caleb standing there, his expression grim and urgent. "You're in danger," he said without preamble. "Pack what you need. I'm taking you somewhere safe." Confusion mingled with her distress. "What are you talking about? I'm not going anywhere with you." Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. "The Alpha sent me." "There are things you don't understand. The Council wants you dead, Lila Moonshade." The use of her family name, her true name, froze the protest on her lips. "How do you know that name?" Because Luna Sophia discovered the truth before she died, and now I need to get you to safety before Elder Blackwood realizes his plan didn't work." Caleb glanced nervously over his shoulder. "The Alpha rejected you publicly to protect you. Now please, we have very little time." Bewilderment replaced despair as Lila tried to process this information. "Protect me? He humiliated me in front of the entire pack." "To save your life," Caleb insisted. "The Council has been eliminating moonshades for generations. They know what you are, what you represent. The Alpha needed to make them believe he felt no bond, that you're of no interest to him." He grabbed her arm gently but firmly. "I'll explain everything, but not here. We need to move now." Stunned and overwhelmed, Lila allowed herself to be led from her cottage into the darkness of the forest. The night that should have fulfilled her grandmother's prophecy had instead become something far more dangerous and complex than she could have imagined. As they moved swiftly through the trees, Lila's mind raced with questions about Thorne's true intentions, the nature of the conspiracy surrounding them, and the fate of a bond that had been denied before it could fully form. 6 months passed after the selection ceremony, months during which the Ironwood Pack underwent subtle but significant changes. Alpha Thorne publicly courted Cassidy of the Redwood Pack, entertaining her family's delegation and participating in formal negotiations regarding their union. To all appearances, he had committed fully to the politically advantageous match the Council had advocated for years. Behind this facade, however, Thorne methodically gathered evidence against the Black Vein Council, working through trusted allies like Caleb to document their manipulations and crimes. Sophia's hidden journals had provided the foundation, but proving centuries of conspiracy required patience and caution. Lila, meanwhile, had disappeared from public view. After Caleb escorted her from her cottage that fateful night, she had been secretly relocated to the most secure location in Ironwood territory, the Royal Nursery, hidden within the Alpha's own residence, but accessible through separate entrances that allowed her to avoid detection. There, she continued her work with the Pack's children, including Thorne's 4 offspring, though few knew of her presence due to the nursery's isolated location at the territory's edge. The arrangement provided perfect cover. As nursery worker, Lila's absence from public gatherings raised no suspicions, while her proximity to the Alpha's children allowed Thorne to receive reports about both her safety and the Council's movements without arousing suspicion. Through Caleb, they exchanged information and gradually developed a strategy to expose the Council's treachery. The winter solstice approached, bringing with it preparations for the formal mating ceremony between Thorne and Cassidy. The Redwood delegation had arrived in force, their presence transforming the Ironwood Pack's usually austere territory into a hub of activity. Elder Blackwood moved through these preparations with the satisfaction of a strategist whose plans were unfolding perfectly, unaware that his carefully constructed web had already begun unraveling. On a bitter cold morning 3 weeks before the scheduled ceremony, tragedy struck. A coordinated attack by rogue wolves hit 3 locations along Ironwood's borders simultaneously. Though the Pack's defenders eventually repelled the invasion, the cost was high: 8 warriors dead, dozens wounded, and critical defensive positions compromised. Most devastating was the targeted attack on a patrol led by James, Thorne's trusted beta and oldest friend. The ambush left James critically wounded and 3 of his warriors dead. As James lay recovering in the Pack healer's quarters, he revealed to Thorne that the attackers had known precisely where to strike, when patrols would be vulnerable, and which warriors to target specifically, information only someone with access to the Pack's most sensitive security protocols could have provided. The attack created exactly the crisis Thorne had been waiting for, a legitimate reason to question the Council's effectiveness and launch an investigation that would allow him to deploy resources toward exposing their treachery without raising suspicion. What neither Thorne nor the Council anticipated was the effect of the attack on his children. 4-year-old Logan, who idolized James, became withdrawn and angry upon learning of his honorary uncle's injuries. 6-year-old Eva, sensitive to the Pack's emotional climate, stopped speaking entirely, retreating into silence as she had after her mother's death. The 3-year-old twins, Max and Miles, began experiencing violent nightmares that left them screaming for hours, inconsolable despite the best efforts of their caretakers. The royal children's deteriorating condition created a secondary crisis that demanded Thorne's attention even as he dealt with the pack's security breach. When multiple caregivers failed to calm the children, the head nursery keeper made a desperate suggestion. Perhaps the Omega, who had worked miracles with troubled children in the main nursery, could help. And so, 2 weeks after the attack, Thorne found himself standing outside the royal nursery, preparing to face Lila for the first time since the selection ceremony 6 months earlier. Their communication had been conducted entirely through intermediaries, a necessary precaution to maintain the illusion of her insignificance to him. Now, circumstances forced a direct confrontation that neither had anticipated. Thorne entered the nursery quietly, unannounced. The scene that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. Lila sat on the floor in a patch of sunlight streaming through tall windows, wearing a simple dress with an apron stained from what appeared to be an art project. Logan sat beside her, arranging toy soldiers in complex formations while explaining strategy with serious intensity. Eva curled against Lila's left side, silent but clearly content, her small hand gripping the Omega's sleeve like a lifeline. The twins napped peacefully in Lila's lap, their white blonde hair so similar to her own that they might have been mistaken for her biological children. Most striking was the transformation of the space itself. When Thorne had last visited, admittedly weeks ago, when his grief and guilt made interaction with his children unbearably painful, the nursery had been sterile and orderly. Now the walls displayed children's artwork. Jars of wildflowers brightened every surface, and toys lay scattered in patterns that suggested recent play rather than neglect. Lila sang softly, an ancient lullaby about the moon goddess watching over her wolf children. Her voice faltered when she sensed Thorne's presence, her body tensing visibly, though she continued holding the sleeping twins without disturbing them. Logan noticed his father first, his small face lighting with surprise and tentative joy. "Papa, you came!" His excitement dimmed slightly with uncertainty. "Do you want to see my battle plans? Mama Lila says I'm getting really good at strategy." The room fell silent. Horror dawned on Logan's features as he realized what he'd said. Thorne's intense gaze locked onto Lila's face at the word Mama. "I'm sorry," Logan whispered, backing up a step. "I know she's not really our mama. I didn't mean to be bad. Please don't be angry." Something in Thorne's expression softened as he knelt to his son's level. "I'm not angry, Logan. You call her Mama?" The boy's chin lifted defiantly, his posture shifting to place himself between his father and Lila in a protective stance that impressed Thorne despite the circumstances. "She acts like a mama acts," Logan said firmly. "She sings to us and doesn't get angry when we're sad or scared. She makes the nightmares go away." His voice dropped to a whisper. "She loves us." Thorne's gaze shifted from his son to truly observe his other children. Eva pressed against Lila's side, watching him warily. The twins sleeping peacefully in a way he hadn't seen since before their mother's death. Then finally to Lila herself, whose pale face showed signs of exhaustion beneath its composed surface. "You've been here the entire time," he said slowly. "Living here, caring for them." Lila nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, Alpha. For 2 weeks, since the council requested I assist with the royal children following the border attack." The council. Of course. They wouldn't have recognized the potential danger in placing Lila near his children, would have seen it only as using an effective tool to solve a problem. Their dismissal of her importance had created this unexpected situation, his traumatized children bonding with the very woman they had tried to eliminate. Thorne moved closer, drawn by something beyond conscious thought. Up close, Lila looked both exhausted and ethereal, her platinum hair falling loose from its customary braid, her pale blue eyes wary as she watched him approach. She wore no cosmetics or jewelry, made no attempt to appear attractive or remarkable. She was exactly as she had been at the selection ceremony, when he had felt the mate bond snap into place and then immediately denied it to protect them both. "They love you," he said, the words emerging rough with emotion. Lila's gaze dropped. They're wonderful children. Anyone would love them. That's not true, Thorne countered, kneeling down to her level. Every other caretaker failed with them. They were unreachable. But you've brought them back. You've given them peace when I couldn't even bear to look at them without drowning in grief. Eva stirred against Lila's side, her small voice breaking weeks of silence. Papa, are you taking Mama Lila away? Please don't. The bad dreams are smaller when she's here. Thorne felt his heart constrict. His daughter had finally spoken, and it was to beg him not to remove the Omega who had become her mother figure, the woman he had publicly rejected despite their true mate status, the woman the council would kill without hesitation if they discovered what she truly represented. I'm not taking her away, Eva, Thorne promised, though the complexity of their situation made such promises difficult to keep. I just needed to see you, to see all of you. I've been a terrible father these past weeks. You were sad, Logan said with the blunt wisdom of a 4-year-old. Mama Lila said you were sad about the pack being hurt, and that's why you couldn't visit much. She said sadness sometimes makes people act different, and we shouldn't be mad at you. Thorne's eyes snapped back to Lila in surprise. You defended me to them? Even after I... He couldn't finish the sentence in front of his children. You're their father and their alpha, Lila responded quietly, her arms tightening protectively around the sleeping twins. They needed to understand that your absence wasn't about them, that you love them even when grief and responsibility make it difficult to show. Mama Lila says love is like the moon, Eva added, her voice gaining confidence. Sometimes clouds cover it up so you can't see it, but it's always there. You're just covered in sad clouds right now, but the love is still there underneath. Thorne couldn't breathe. This woman, this Omega he had rejected publicly, had been teaching his children about his love for them while he struggled with guilt and duty. She had been healing their trauma, soothing their fears, and filling the void their mother's death had created. And in 2 weeks, he was scheduled to bind himself to another woman forever, in a ceremony designed to cement the council's control over his pack. I should go, Lila said carefully, attempting to shift the twins without waking them. I'm sure you want time with your children. Don't, Thorne said sharply, then softened his tone. Please don't leave. Not yet. Lila finally looked directly at him, and the pain in her pale eyes made his wolf howl in distress. Alpha Thorne, you made your choice 6 months ago at the selection ceremony. In 2 weeks, you will make it again by mating with Cassidy. I've accepted that reality, but I will not sit here and pretend my heart isn't breaking while you prepare to mark someone else. I deserve more respect than that. You're right, Thorne agreed immediately. You deserve so much more than what I've given you. You deserve honesty, now more than ever. He glanced at his children, who watched with wide eyes, sensing the importance of the moment, even if they didn't understand all the words. 6 months ago I felt the mate bond form between us, Thorne said, his voice low but intense. My wolf recognized you instantly as my true mate. But the council had spent years convincing me that political alliance mattered more than personal connection, that the pack's stability depended on strategic unions. So I denied what I felt. I rejected you publicly while arranging to protect you privately. Lila's face paled further. You felt the bond and rejected it anyway? You humiliated me in front of the entire pack even though you knew we were true mates? I was a coward, Thorne admitted, the words tearing from him with painful honesty. I told myself I was protecting you from the council's assassins, that keeping you at a distance would keep you alive until I could dismantle their power structure. But the truth is more complicated. I've spent 15 years believing my duty to the pack required sacrificing personal happiness. I convinced myself that rejecting our bond was necessary for the greater good. And now? Lila challenged, her voice sharpening with hurt and anger. Now that you've seen me with your children, now that you've discovered I'm useful to you, suddenly you want to acknowledge what you denied? It's not about usefulness, Thorne insisted. Seeing you with my children showed me what I've been fighting for all along. Not just the pack's political stability, but its heart and future. You haven't just helped my children. You've reminded me what leadership should truly protect. The Council has twisted pack values for generations, convincing alphas that power matters more than connection, that political advantage outweighs spiritual bonds. I nearly became what they wanted, a puppet king too focused on strategy to see what truly matters. Logan tugged at his father's sleeve. "Papa, do you love Mama Leela? Like in the stories where the Wolf King finds his true mate and knows just by looking in her eyes?" The innocent question cut through layers of adult complexity. Thorn looked at his son, then at Lila cradling his other children, all watching him with varying degrees of hope and wariness. His wolf surged within him, howling that his mate sat before him, that his children had already accepted her, that everything he needed existed in this room if he found the courage to claim it. "Yes," Thorn said simply, looking directly into Lila's stunned eyes. "I love her. I've loved her since I first saw her 6 months ago, even while trying to deny it. She's my true mate, and I've been a fool." "Then why are you marrying the scary lady?" Logan asked with a child's brutal honesty. "We don't like her. She looked at us like we were doing everything wrong. Mama Lila loves us even when we make mistakes." Thorn stood abruptly, pacing to the window where he could see pack members preparing for the upcoming ceremony. Everything was proceeding according to plan, a plan that now felt hollow and misguided. His investigation into the Council was building momentum, but it would take months more to compile enough evidence to move against them safely. The ceremony with Cassidy was meant to lull them into complacency while he worked. But standing in this nursery, witnessing the family that could be his, Thorn suddenly saw with clarity what truly mattered. His children needed Lila. He needed Lila. The pack needed leaders bonded in truth rather than political convenience. He turned back to face Lila, whose expression reflected the emotional turmoil his confession had created. "If I canceled the ceremony," he said carefully, "if I publicly claimed you as my true mate in front of the pack, the Council, and Cassidy's delegation, what would you say?" Lila's breath caught. "You can't cancel." "The political ramifications would be enormous. The Council would fight you. Cassidy's pack could declare it an insult worthy of war. Everything is already arranged." "I don't care," Thorn stated with absolute conviction. "I don't care about politics or councils or arrangements. I care about doing what's right, about being brave enough to claim my true mate this time, about giving my children the mother they've already chosen, about choosing you over everything else as I should have done 6 months ago." "They'll destroy me," Lila whispered, real fear entering her eyes. "The Council has eliminated my entire bloodline. They'll say I manipulated you, that I used your children to ensnare you. I'll become their primary target." "Then I'll defend you," Thorn promised fiercely. "We'll expose the Black Vein Council for what they are. I've spent 6 months gathering evidence of their treachery." Sophia left documentation of their involvement in dozens of suspicious deaths, including members of your family. "With your testimony about your heritage and abilities, we can break their power once and for all." "And if we fail?" Lila challenged. "If they're too entrenched, too powerful?" "Then we leave," Thorn said without hesitation, surprising even himself with the conviction behind the words. "We take our children and establish a new pack, one founded on truth and genuine bonds rather than manipulation and fear. I would rather be an honorable wolf than a corrupted king." Logan moved to stand beside his father, his small hand slipping into Thorn's much larger one. "Does this mean Mama Lila will really be our mama? Forever?" Thorn looked down at his son, then back to Lila, who sat frozen between hope and disbelief. "That depends on Lila. I've taken her choices away once before. I won't do it again." He knelt before her, maintaining enough distance to respect her space while making his intentions clear. "I'm asking you, Lila Moonshade, last daughter of an ancient and noble line, to consider becoming my Luna, my mate, and mother to my children. Not for political advantage, not for convenience, but because the moon goddess created a bond between us that I was too blind and cowardly to honor before now." Lila looked from Thorn to the children surrounding her. Logan watching with hopeful intensity, Eva pressed against her side, the twins still sleeping peacefully in her lap. She thought about her grandmother's final prophecy, about the dreams that had haunted her for months, about the mate bond she had felt forming and then shattering at the selection ceremony. "I'm afraid," she confessed quietly, "afraid of believing in this and having it taken away, afraid of standing against forces that have hunted my family for generations, afraid of loving you all even more than I already do, only to lose you." "Then we'll be afraid together," Thorn said, reaching out to take her free hand in his. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it. And I promise you this, whatever comes, we face it as mates, as a family, as a united force stronger than any conspiracy or council." Eva wrapped her small arms around Lila's neck. "Please stay, Mama Lila. Please be our real mama." Lila closed her eyes, tears streaming down her pale cheeks as she fought the internal battle between self-preservation and hope, between the safety of invisibility and the risk of being truly seen. When she opened her eyes again, they held new resolve. "Yes," she whispered, the word gathering strength as she repeated it. "Yes, I'll be your mate. I'll be their mother. I'll stand against the council and help you restore the pack to what it should be. But Thorn, if this is another deception, another strategy, if you hurt me or these children again, there will be no forgiveness." Thorn nodded solemnly. "No deception. No strategy except the truth. From this moment forward, we move together in honesty, whatever the consequences." He leaned forward, his forehead touching hers in the traditional gesture of wolf mates, their breath mingling as the mate bond that had been denied began reforming between them, stronger than before. They remained that way, connected in the golden afternoon light of the nursery, surrounded by the children who had inadvertently brought them together. Outside, the pack continued preparations for a ceremony that would never take place. The council continued plotting, unaware that their carefully constructed world was about to shatter. And somewhere in the sacred forest, the spirits of Alpha ancestors stirred, sensing the fulfillment of a prophecy, generations in the making. The white wolf had found her Alpha king, and together they would bring either salvation or destruction to the Ironwood pack. The pale light of dawn filtered through the nursery windows as Lila stirred from her restless sleep. She had spent the night on a small cot beside the twins' beds, responding to their nightmares whenever they woke crying. The events of the previous day still seemed unreal. Thorn's unexpected appearance, his confession about their mate bond, his declaration that he would cancel the upcoming ceremony with Cassidy. But reality had a way of asserting itself in the cold light of morning. Lila knew that Thorn's declaration, however sincere, would face enormous opposition. The Black Vein Council had spent generations securing their power. They wouldn't relinquish it without a fight, and the conflict would engulf everyone Lila had come to love. As she rose to prepare for the day, something caught her attention. A shimmer in the air around Max, the younger twin, who still slept fitfully despite the morning light. Lila approached quietly, her moonshade senses detecting an anomaly that had eluded her until now. When she placed her palm gently on the child's forehead, a flash of darkness momentarily enveloped her vision, a shadow that didn't belong, something unnatural clinging to the boy's spirit. Lila withdrew her hand with a sharp intake of breath. This was no ordinary trauma affecting the royal children. The darkness she sensed carried the unmistakable signature of spiritual interference, what her grandmother had called soul binding. Someone had attached dark energy to these innocent children, creating the nightmares and emotional disturbances that had resisted conventional healing. The implications chilled her to the bone. Such manipulation required advanced knowledge of forbidden arts, the same dark practices that the Black Vein Council had supposedly been created to prevent. If they were now employing these techniques themselves, their corruption ran deeper than even Thorn suspected. The nursery door opened, and Logan entered, already dressed for the day, his small face serious beyond his years. "Mama Lila, is something wrong with Max?" Lila composed herself, not wanting to frighten the boy. He's just having trouble sleeping, that's all. How are you feeling this morning?" Logan shrugged, climbing onto a chair near the window. "Father told me that things are going to change soon, that the council might be angry." His ice-blue eyes, so like his father's, fixed on Lila with unsettling directness. "Are they going to try to hurt you? Because of us?" Lila crossed the room and knelt before the child, taking his small hands in hers. "Your father is trying to make things right, Logan. That sometimes makes people uncomfortable, especially people who have gotten used to things being wrong. But you don't need to worry about me." "I do worry," Logan insisted. "I heard Father talking to Caleb last night after you fell asleep. He said the council killed my mother because she knew too much, that they might try to kill you too." Lila's heart constricted at both the boy's knowledge and his matter-of-fact delivery. Children living in wolf packs understood death earlier than human children, but no child should have to comprehend assassination and conspiracy. "Your father is very strong and very smart," Lila assured him. "He's been gathering evidence against those who would harm us, and I have strengths of my own that few people know about." She hesitated, then decided the boy deserved honesty. "I can sense things about people, about their spirits. It's a gift from my family line, and it helps me protect those I care about." Logan digested this information with a thoughtful nod. "Is that how you make the nightmares go away? Ava says when you sing to her, the bad dreams can't get in." "Something like that," Lila confirmed, her mind racing with possibilities. If she could sense the dark energy affecting the children, perhaps she could remove it entirely. Her grandmother had taught her rudimentary cleansing techniques, though she had never attempted anything as complex as removing an intentional binding. The sound of the other children waking interrupted their conversation. The day unfolded in a blur of activity: breakfast, learning sessions for the older children, playtime for the twins. Thorne did not visit, sending word through Caleb that he was meeting with allied pack representatives who had arrived early for the ceremony, using the opportunity to discreetly sound out potential allies against the council. That evening, when the children were settled for bed, Lila began her investigation in earnest. She started with Eva, whose silent compliance made her the easiest subject. The little girl lay in her bed, clutching her favorite blanket, watching Lila with solemn gray eyes. "Eva, sweetheart, I'm going to sing a special song tonight," Lila explained, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It might make you feel strange for a moment, but it will help chase away the bad dreams for good. Will you trust me?" Eva nodded, her grip on the blanket tightening as Lila began to sing. Unlike the lullabies she usually offered, this melody was ancient and complex, taught to her by her grandmother in the final months of the old woman's life. It was a moonshade hymn, designed to illuminate spiritual bonds, both natural and unnatural. As the song filled the room, Lila placed her hands on either side of Eva's head, channeling her energy into making the invisible visible. Slowly, a faint web of shadowy tendrils became apparent, wrapping around the child's consciousness like dark vines. At their center, connecting Eva to some distant source, was a symbol Lila recognized from her grandmother's teachings: the mark of binding, deliberately implanted to create emotional distress. Eva whimpered as the darkness became more defined, responding to Lila's probing energy. Lila shifted her song to a purification melody, attempting to weaken the binding without causing the child pain. The dark tendrils resisted, constricting tighter around Eva's spirit, but Lila persisted, focusing her inherent moonshade abilities on the central binding point. After nearly an hour, Lila succeeded in loosening the binding enough to examine its structure. The sophistication of the work confirmed her worst fears. This was the handiwork of a master practitioner, someone with decades of experience in forbidden arts. More disturbing was the binding's purpose. It wasn't designed merely to cause nightmares or emotional distress. It was positioned to influence the development of Eva's wolf nature, specifically to suppress certain instincts and enhance others. It was a control mechanism, subtle enough to go undetected until it had permanently altered the child's natural personality and abilities. And if all 4 royal children carried similar bindings, the implications were staggering. The council was literally shaping the next generation to suit their purposes, molding potential future alphas into puppets before they even developed their full powers. Lila carefully withdrew her energy, not yet strong enough to remove the binding completely without risking damage to Eva's delicate spiritual structure. The little girl had fallen asleep during the process, her features more peaceful than Lila had ever seen them. The binding had been temporarily weakened, which would provide some relief from the nightmares, but permanent removal would require more power and preparation. Over the next 3 days, Lila examined each child, finding similar bindings on all 4, though the specific positioning and intent varied. Logan's binding focused on aggression, designed to eventually make him unstable and impulsive, unsuitable for leadership despite being the eldest. The twins' bindings were less developed due to their younger age, but followed the same pattern of emotional and instinctual manipulation. On the 4th night, as Lila recorded her findings in a journal she kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard, a soft knock at the nursery door announced Caleb's arrival. The young warrior looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept in days. "Alpha Thorn requests your presence in his private study," Caleb whispered, glancing nervously toward the sleeping children. "He's discovered something important in Luna Sophia's records." "I can't leave them alone," Lila protested. "The nightmares." "I'll stay with them," Caleb promised. The Alpha was insistent. He said it concerns what you've been investigating with the children. Reluctantly, Lila followed Caleb's directions through a series of rarely used corridors, designed to allow the Alpha's family to move about the pack compound without being observed. The route terminated at a hidden door that opened into Thorne's private study, a room lined with books and maps, illuminated by the warm glow of oil lamps rather than electric lights that might be observed from outside. Thorne stood at a large table, covered with ancient texts and loose papers, his powerful frame tense with suppressed energy. When Lila entered, he looked up, his ice-blue eyes reflecting both relief and concern. For a moment, neither spoke, the mate bond between them humming with awareness, despite their limited interaction over the past days. "You found something in the children," Thorne said finally, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Something unnatural." It wasn't a question, but Lila nodded confirmation. Soul bindings. Dark energy deliberately attached to manipulate their development. All 4 carry them, though the specific intent varies. "Show me," Thorne demanded, gesturing to the papers spread before him. Lila approached the table cautiously. Though they had declared their intentions to each other, their relationship remained new and uncertain, weighted by months of separation and years of conspiracy surrounding them. When she reached his side, she saw what had captured his attention: diagrams of binding symbols identical to those she had discovered on the children. "These were in Sophia's private journal," Thorne explained, his finger tracing one particularly complex design. She documented finding these marks on the children during a spiritual cleansing ritual performed on the winter solstice 2 years ago. She began investigating their origin and meaning, consulting texts from before the Black Vein Council's formation. Lila leaned closer to examine the diagrams, her shoulder brushing against Thorne's arm. The momentary contact sent a ripple of energy between them, the mate bond responding to their proximity after days apart. Both ignored the sensation, focusing on the critical information before them. "These are control bindings," Lila confirmed, pointing to specific elements within the symbols. The central node connects to emotions, while these outer patterns influence instinctual responses. This one on Logan is designed to enhance aggression while suppressing rational thought. Over time, it would make him unstable, dangerous, unsuitable for leadership, despite being your firstborn. Thorne's jaw tightened, rage flashing in his eyes. "And the others?" "Eva's binding suppresses verbal expression and confidence. The twins' bindings are less developed, but follow the same pattern of limiting their natural abilities in ways that would make them ineffective leaders." "They're ensuring none of my children could challenge their control," Thorn growled, his hands clenching into fists. "Sophia discovered this and they killed her for it." He drew a deep breath, visibly struggling to contain his fury. "Can the bindings be removed?" "With time and preparation, yes, but it's delicate work. Removing them too quickly could damage their spiritual development, and whoever placed them would sense the disruption immediately." "Elder Blackwood," Thorn said with certainty. "Sophia's notes identify him as the Council's ritual master, though she never witnessed him performing the bindings directly." "Then we have a problem," Lila observed grimly. "If I begin systematically removing the bindings, he'll know someone with moonshade abilities is interfering. It would expose me before you're ready to move against the Council." Thorn straightened, pacing away from the table to stare into the fireplace. The flames cast his sharp features into dramatic relief, highlighting the conflict written in every line of his body. When he turned back to Lila, his expression had hardened into resolve. "I'm accelerating our timeline. The ceremony with Cassidy is scheduled for 10 days from now. I've arranged for key allies to arrive early, including alphas from 3 neighboring territories who owe me personal debts. Once they're in place, I'll make my move against the Council." "And Cassidy? Her family? They arrived expecting a mating ceremony." Thorn's mouth twisted. "Cassidy is not what she appears. Caleb has been watching her, documenting her movements. She regularly meets with Elder Blackwood in secret, returns to her quarters with unknown substances, and has been observed performing small rituals in private. She's either complicit in the conspiracy or another victim being used as a tool." "You suspect she might be controlled as well?" Lila asked, remembering the cold, disinterested woman who had visited the nursery the previous week, whose presence had sent the children into fits of anxiety. "It's possible. The Redwood Pack has been closely aligned with our council for generations. Their alpha, Richard, was fostered here as a child under Elder Blackwood's direct supervision." Thorn returned to the table, standing close enough that Lila could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Either way, I won't proceed with a false mating when my true mate stands before me." His words sent warmth spreading through Lila's chest, though caution tempered her response. "The Council won't surrender their power willingly. They've killed to maintain it before. Which is why we need concrete evidence that will turn the pack against them," Thorn replied. "Sophia began gathering it, and I've continued her work. Financial records showing resources diverted to private accounts, correspondence with enemy packs providing inside information about our defenses, testimony from pack members who have lost family under suspicious circumstances." His voice softened. "But the most compelling evidence would be a demonstration of what they've done to my children, performed before witnesses who cannot be silenced or controlled." Lila understood immediately what he was suggesting. "You want me to publicly reveal and remove the bindings, to show the pack what the Council has done to their future leaders." "Not just the pack," Thorn corrected, "the visiting alphas as well. Such manipulation of alpha bloodlines violates our most sacred laws. No pack would tolerate such interference with their future. It would unite them against the Council immediately." "It would also expose me completely," Lila noted, though without accusation. "My abilities, my heritage, everything the Council has spent generations trying to eliminate." Thorn's expression gentled as he reached for her hand, enfolding it in his larger one. "I would never ask this if I saw another path, but the children cannot wait much longer. The bindings strengthen with each passing moon. Soon, the damage will be permanent." Lila looked down at their joined hands, feeling the mate bond pulse between them, stronger than before, despite the limited contact they had maintained for safety. She thought of the children sleeping in the nursery, innocent victims in a power struggle spanning generations. She thought of her grandmother's final prophecy about the moonshade line emerging from shadow to restore balance. "I'll need 3 days to prepare," she said finally. "There are rituals I must perform, strength I must gather, and I'll need access to any remaining artifacts from my bloodline that might have survived the Council's purge." Relief washed over Thorn's features. Sophia found several moonshade relics hidden in the oldest section of the pack archives. She relocated them to a secure location before her death. He released Lila's hand to retrieve a small key from his desk. "This opens a chamber beneath the sacred oak at the heart of our territory. The relics are there, along with the remainder of Sophia's evidence." As Lila accepted the key, their fingers brushed, sending another pulse of energy between them. This time, neither ignored it. Thorn's gaze captured hers, the ice blue of his eyes warming with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When this is finished," he promised softly, "when the council is exposed and the children are free, we will complete our bond properly, under the full moon, with the blessing of the pack and the moon goddess herself. No more hiding, no more denial. No, you will take your rightful place as my Luna, my mate, the mother of my children." "If we survive what's coming," Lila amended, though a smile softened her practical words. "We will survive," Thorn stated with alpha certainty. "The prophecy doesn't end with our destruction. It ends with the Ironwood Pack entering an age of unprecedented strength, with the White Wolf and the Alpha King united, bringing salvation rather than destruction." Before Lila could respond, a sound from the corridor outside brought both their heads around. Thorn moved with predatory silence to the study door, listening intently before opening it to reveal Caleb, his young face taut with urgency. "Alpha, we have a problem," the guard reported. "Elder Blackwood is calling an emergency council meeting. One of his spies must have reported something suspicious." Thorn's expression darkened. "When?" "Now, at the sacred clearing rather than the council chambers." Caleb's implication was clear. Meetings at the sacred clearing were not recorded or witnessed, perfect for conversations meant to remain private. "Go," Lila urged Thorn. "If you refuse to attend, it will only increase their suspicion." Thorn nodded grimly. "Return to the nursery. Lock the doors. Allow no one entry except Caleb or myself, no matter what authority they claim." He addressed his guard next. "Remain with them. If anyone attempts to remove the children or Lila from the nursery, get them out through the emergency tunnel. Take them to the rendezvous point we discussed." Caleb nodded, his hand moving to the weapon at his hip in silent confirmation of his willingness to use whatever force necessary to protect his charges. As they prepared to separate, Thorn caught Lila's arm gently, his expression intense. "Be vigilant. The council may accelerate their plans if they suspect opposition." "As should we," Lila replied, her voice steadier than she felt. She reached up impulsively, her palm resting against Thorn's cheek in a gesture both tender and grounding. "Be careful. Remember who you're facing. Not just politicians, but practitioners of dark arts, willing to kill to maintain power." Thorn turned his face into her touch, his lips brushing her palm in a gesture that sent warmth cascading through her. Then he was gone, moving swiftly down the corridor toward whatever confrontation awaited, leaving Lila and Caleb to return to the nursery and the vulnerable children whose futures hung in the balance. The night passed without incident, though Lila remained vigilant, checking the children frequently for any changes in the bindings that might indicate interference. By morning, tension filled the royal quarters as rumors spread that Elder Blackwood had dispatched messengers to outlying territories in the middle of the night, though the content of those messages remained unknown. Thorn did not return, sending word through trusted channels that he was engaged in complex negotiations with allied packs, positioning pieces on the board before making his final move. The delay, while strategically necessary, increased Lila's anxiety. Each passing day brought Cassidy's mating ceremony closer, while the children's bindings continued their insidious work. On the third day after their meeting in Thorn's study, Lila made her move. With Caleb standing guard outside the nursery, she gathered the children in a circle on the playroom floor, surrounding them with candles and symbols drawn in purified salt. Logan watched the preparations with solemn curiosity, while Eva clutched her blanket, sensing the gravity of the moment. The twins, unusually subdued, sat close together, their small faces serious. "We're going to play a special game today," Lila explained, keeping her voice light despite the ritual's significance. "I'm going to sing a special song, and you're going to imagine the strongest, brightest light you can, pushing away any shadows inside you." "The bad dreams?" Ava asked quietly, her gray eyes wide. "Yes, sweetheart, the bad dreams and the sad feelings that don't belong to you. Lila met each child's gaze, ensuring they understood the importance of their participation. It might feel strange, maybe a little scary at first, but I promise it will help. Father says you're special, Logan stated matter-of-factly, that you can see things other people can't. That's why the bad people are afraid of you. Lila smiled gently at the boy's perceptiveness. That's part of it. My family has always been able to see connections between people, especially when those connections aren't natural or healthy. She positioned herself at the circle's head, where she could maintain eye contact with all 4 children. Now close your eyes and listen to my voice. Let the song carry you. As the children complied, Lila began the ancient moonshade cleansing ritual, her voice rising and falling in patterns passed down through generations. The melody was complex, designed to resonate with the spiritual energy that bound all living beings together. As she sang, she extended her awareness outward, connecting first with Logan's spirit, where the binding glowed like a malevolent spider at the center of a dark web. Unlike her previous examinations, this time Lila channeled her full power into severing the binding's anchor points. The moonshade relics she had retrieved from Sophia's hiding place lay before her. A crystalline orb, a silver dagger with runes etched into the blade, and a small vial of water from the sacred spring that had once flowed near the original moonshade settlement. These objects amplified her natural abilities, allowing her to work more efficiently without depleting her own reserves. Logan gasped as the first anchor point broke, his small body stiffening as dark energy dispersed. Lila maintained her focus, systematically destroying each connection until the central binding collapsed. The backlash of energy would alert Elder Blackwood immediately, but Lila was committed now. She would free all 4 children before he could intervene. She moved methodically from child to child, breaking the bindings in sequence. Eva wept silently as her binding shattered, years of suppressed emotions flooding through her as the unnatural restrictions dissolved. The twins reacted physically, their small bodies convulsing briefly before settling into peaceful stillness, the bindings too newly formed to have created deep spiritual wounds. As the final binding broke, a pulse of power radiated outward from the nursery, a spiritual shockwave that would be felt by anyone sensitive to such energies. Lila completed the cleansing ritual quickly, sealing the children's auras against immediate interference, then gathered them close as the inevitable reaction began. Logan recovered first, his eyes clearing as he looked around in wonder. "I feel different," he whispered. "Lighter." Eva nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. "The scary voice is gone, the one that said I shouldn't talk because no one wanted to hear me." The twins simply curled against Lila, exhausted but visibly peaceful for the first time since she had met them. She stroked their white blonde hair, monitoring their energy as it stabilized in patterns that were entirely their own, free from external manipulation. The nursery door burst open as Caleb rushed in, his expression alarmed. "They felt it," he reported tersely. "Elder Blackwood collapsed during a meeting with the Redwood delegation. When he recovered, he dispatched guards to secure the royal quarters. They'll be here within minutes." "Then we must move now," Lila decided, rising to her feet with Miles in her arms while Caleb lifted Max. "Logan, Eva, stay close to us. We're going to meet your father at a special place." "The Sacred Oak?" Logan asked, helping Eva gather her blanket. Lila nodded, impressed by the boy's intuition. "Yes, it's time for the truth to be revealed." Caleb led them through the emergency tunnel concealed behind a bookshelf in the nursery's reading nook. The passage was narrow and dark, designed for evacuation rather than comfort, but the children moved through it without complaint, sensing the urgency of their situation. Logan held Eva's hand, guiding his sister with remarkable maturity for a 4-year-old, while Lila and Caleb carried the twins through the confined space. The tunnel emerged in a small clearing half a mile from the pack compound, where horses waited, secured by another of Thorne's trusted warriors. With practiced efficiency they mounted, Lila with Miles secured before her, Caleb with Max, and the older children riding with the warrior. Then they were moving through the forest at a controlled gallop, following game trails toward the heart of Ironwood territory. The sacred oak stood alone in a massive clearing, its ancient branches spreading wider than any other tree in the territory. Generations of alphas had conducted important ceremonies beneath its protective canopy, drawing on the spiritual energy that had accumulated there over centuries. As they approached, Lila saw figures already gathered around the tree: Thorn, flanked by several warriors, and 3 imposing men who could only be the visiting alphas he had mentioned. More concerning were the approaching figures from the opposite direction: Elder Blackwood, accompanied by the remaining council members, and a contingent of pack guards whose loyalty appeared divided, some moving closer to Thorn, while others remained with the council. As Lila and the children reached the clearing, Thorn strode forward to meet them, his ice-blue eyes assessing them swiftly for any sign of harm. Finding none, he lifted Logan and Eva from their mount with one powerful arm, setting them safely on the ground before turning to help Lila dismount with Miles still clutched against her chest. "You've done it," he murmured, his voice carrying pride and relief. "I felt the bindings break." "As did I," Elder Blackwood announced, his aged voice carrying across the clearing with surprising strength. "I felt someone interfere with pack children using forbidden arts that have been outlawed for generations for the safety of all." The elder's accusation was calculated to turn the gathered wolves against Lila immediately, painting her actions as dangerous rather than healing. She straightened, still holding Miles, while Logan and Eva pressed against her legs protectively. "Forbidden arts?" she repeated, her voice clear and carrying. "Like the binding spells placed on these innocent children without their father's knowledge or consent? Spells designed to warp their natural development and make them unsuitable for leadership?" Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Elder Blackwood's face remained impassive, though rage flickered in his cold eyes. "Desperate accusations from a desperate woman. This Omega has enchanted our Alpha, turning him against his proper mate and legitimate counsel, using the same forbidden abilities that led to her family's necessary elimination generations ago." Thorn stepped forward, positioning himself between Lila and the council. "My children were bound without my knowledge, their spirits manipulated to serve the council's agenda rather than the pack's welfare. Lila Moonshade has removed those bindings, freeing them to develop as nature and the moon goddess intended." "Moonshade?" One of the visiting alphas moved forward, a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair and penetrating green eyes. "The Moonshade line was reported extinct 3 generations ago." "A convenient fiction," Thorn replied, "perpetuated by those who feared their abilities to detect spiritual manipulation and heal soul wounds." He gestured toward the children clustered around Lila. "My son, speak the truth of what you experienced today." Logan stepped forward, his small frame somehow commanding despite his youth, the natural alpha in him already evident now that the binding no longer suppressed it. "The lady broke the dark thing inside me," he stated clearly. "The thing that made me want to hurt people and break things even when I didn't really want to. The thing that whispered I should hate my father and never listen to him." Eva moved to stand beside her brother, her voice soft but steady. "She broke the shadow that told me to be quiet, that no one wanted to hear me, that I should hide and be afraid all the time." Elder Blackwood's mask of benevolence slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Children imagine many things, especially when influenced by those with agenda against the pack's stability. This Omega has bewitched them, just as she has bewitched their father." "A serious accusation," observed another of the visiting alphas, a powerfully built man with russet hair. "One that can be easily tested. In the presence of 3 neutral alphas, with the sacred oak as witness, let the truth be determined through traditional means." He referred to an ancient practice rarely invoked in modern times, the rite of revelation, where those accused of spiritual interference submitted to a ritual that revealed their true nature and intent. The risk lay in its indiscriminate exposure of all spiritual interference, not just that performed by the accused. "I accept the challenge," Lila stated before Elder Blackwood could protest. "I will submit to the rite of revelation, provided all council members do the same." The elder's face tightened, options visibly calculating behind his cold eyes. Refusal would be tantamount to admission of guilt, yet acceptance would reveal the very manipulations he had worked decades to conceal. "This is unnecessary," he hedged. "The traditions of our pack have served us well for generations. Outside interference in our governance is both unwelcome and inappropriate." "This goes beyond governance," Thorn countered. "The systematic binding of alpha children affects all packs, threatens all bloodlines. If it happens in Ironwood territory today, it could happen in any territory tomorrow." He turned to address the visiting alphas directly. "This is why I requested your presence, not merely as witnesses, but as defenders of our collective future." One of the visiting alphas, a lean man with features that suggested Native American heritage, stepped forward. "My grandfather spoke of the Moonshade line," he said, studying Lila with keen interest. "He called them spirit walkers, wolves who could see the invisible bonds between souls and mend those that were broken. He mourned their loss as one of the great tragedies of our kind." He approached Lila slowly, respectfully, stopping at a distance that acknowledged both her personal space and her status as mate to another alpha. "If you are truly Moonshade, show us what has been done to these children. Not through words, but through the seeing that is your birthright." It was a significant request, asking Lila to demonstrate abilities that had been kept hidden for generations. She glanced at Thorn, who nodded almost imperceptibly, his support evident despite the risk. With a deep breath, Lila handed Miles to Caleb, then knelt at the center of the clearing, beneath the sacred oak's spreading branches. "I will need the children," she said quietly, "and something of Elder Blackwood's, an object he has carried close to his person for many years." The elder recoiled, but one of the pack guards who had shifted his allegiance to Thorn moved swiftly, removing a medallion from around Blackwood's neck before he could protest. The guard delivered it to Lila, who accepted it carefully, wrapping it in a silk cloth rather than touching it directly. The children gathered around her without prompting, instinctively forming a circle as they had in the nursery. Lila placed the wrapped medallion at the circle's center, then reached for the Moonshade relics she had carried from the nursery, the crystalline orb, the silver dagger, and the vial of sacred water. "What you are about to see has been hidden from our kind for generations," she explained, addressing the gathered wolves. "Not because it is dark or forbidden, but because those who feared its revealing power sought to eliminate it." With practiced movements, Lila arranged the relics in a triangular pattern around the medallion, then began singing the Revelation melody, different from the cleansing song she had used in the nursery, but carrying the same ancient power. As her voice filled the clearing, she placed one hand on Logan's head and the other on the crystalline orb, creating a circuit of energy. The effect was immediate and startling. From the orb, a column of light shot upward, then spread outward like the branches of a spectral tree. Within this luminous structure, dark threads became visible, hundreds of them, connecting various wolves in the clearing to Elder Blackwood through the medallion at the circle's center. The threads varied in thickness and intensity, but their meaning was unmistakable, spiritual bindings connecting the elder to those he controlled. Most shocking were the threads leading from the medallion to the remaining council members, not controlling them, but being controlled by them. Elder Blackwood himself was a nexus of dark energy, but the source of that energy came from elsewhere, channeled through him rather than originating within him. Lila's voice never faltered as she shifted her hand from Logan to Eva, changing the revelation's focus. Now the spectral display showed the recently severed bindings on the royal children, the broken threads still visible though no longer attached. More disturbing were similar bindings on other pack children present in the clearing, and even some adults whose expressions revealed they had no knowledge of the manipulation affecting them. Gasps and growls filled the clearing as wolves recognized bindings on themselves or loved ones. The visiting alphas watched in grim silence, their expressions hardening as the extent of the spiritual manipulation became clear. When Lila placed her hand on Miles, the revelation changed again, showing not just present bindings, but their history, how they had spread from the original Black Vein Council members centuries ago, gradually encompassing more wolves with each generation. The pattern revealed a systematic subversion of free will and natural development, designed to maintain the Council's control regardless of who held the official alpha position. As the revelation concluded, Lila's voice faded, the spectral display collapsing back into the crystalline orb with a final pulse of light. Silence fell over the clearing, heavy with the weight of what had been revealed. Lila remained kneeling, exhaustion evident in her pale features, the demonstration having drained her considerably despite the relic's amplification. Elder Blackwood broke the silence, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Illusions and manipulations from a practitioner of forbidden arts. This changes nothing. The Council's authority remains absolute under pack law established generations ago." "Pack law perverted by spiritual interference," Thorne countered, moving to stand beside Lila. He addressed the gathered wolves directly, his alpha authority evident in every word. "You have witnessed the truth with your own eyes. The Council has bound our children, manipulated our decisions, and killed those who discovered their treachery. My mate Sophia died because she uncovered evidence of their spiritual interference. They arranged the attack that took her life, then bound our children to ensure the next generation remained under their control." The accusation hung in the air, supported by the evidence just revealed. Elder Blackwood's expression shifted, calculation replacing denial as he recognized the turning tide. When he spoke again, his voice carried a different note, the cold certainty of someone preparing a final gambit. "You speak of interference and control," he said, his gaze fixed on Thorne. "Yet, you would bind yourself to a moonshade witch whose bloodline has sought dominance through spiritual manipulation since the earliest days of our kind. The Black Vein Council was formed specifically to counter their influence, to protect wolves from those who would control them through unseen means." He turned to address the visiting alphas directly. "The bindings you witnessed serve a protective purpose, limiting dangerous tendencies and ensuring stable leadership. Without such guidance, wolf packs would descend into chaos, ruled by instinct rather than wisdom. The Moonshade line was eliminated because their abilities threatened this necessary structure. It was a clever pivot, attempting to reframe the Council's actions as protective rather than controlling. Some of the gathered wolves appeared swayed, particularly those with limited exposure to the Council's more direct manipulations. But the visiting alphas remained skeptical, their expressions revealing they had witnessed too much to accept this revised narrative. The alpha with Native American features spoke first. "I have seen enough. The systematic binding of children without parental knowledge or consent violates our most sacred laws, regardless of claimed purpose. The Ironwood Pack deserves leadership free from such interference." The russet-haired alpha nodded agreement. Furthermore, the targeting of a specific bloodline for elimination based on their spiritual abilities constitutes genocide under pack law. The Black Vein Council must be dissolved, and its members held accountable. The third visiting alpha, who had remained largely silent until now, finally added his judgment. "Alpha Thorne has presented compelling evidence of conspiracy, manipulation, and murder. As neutral witnesses, we recognize his authority to determine appropriate consequences under traditional pack law." Their unified position represented a devastating blow to Elder Blackwood's authority. The council members behind him began shifting nervously, some edging away as if to distance themselves from what was coming. The elder himself remained outwardly composed, though the calculating look in his eyes intensified. "You have been deceived," he said flatly, "but this error can still be corrected." With surprising speed for his age, Elder Blackwood withdrew a small obsidian blade from within his robes. Before anyone could react, he slashed his own palm, allowing blood to drip onto the ground as he began chanting in an ancient language that made the air itself seem to thicken. "Stop him!" Thorne commanded, lunging forward, but an invisible barrier repelled him, forcing him back several steps. Around the clearing, wolves found themselves similarly unable to approach as Elder Blackwood's blood magic created a protective circle around himself and the remaining council members. Lila struggled to her feet, recognizing the chant from her grandmother's warnings about the darkest forbidden arts. "He's activating all the bindings simultaneously," she called to Thorn. "Every wolf connected to the council will be forced to fight on their behalf, regardless of their conscious choice." The implications were horrifying. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of pack members would become unwilling soldiers in a battle they had no desire to join, forced by spiritual bindings to defend those who had enslaved them. Parents might fight children, mates might fight each other, all controlled by blood magic that overrode free will entirely. "Get the children to safety," Thorn ordered Caleb, who immediately gathered the twins while directing Logan and Eva toward the horses. Then Thorn turned to Lila, his expression grave but determined. "Can you counter this? Can the Moonshade abilities break blood magic?" Lila's mind raced through everything her grandmother had taught her, searching for any technique that might work against such powerful dark magic. "Not alone," she admitted. "Blood magic draws on life force directly. It's too strong for one Moonshade to counter, especially one with limited training." "But not for a Moonshade connected to an Alpha," suggested the Native American Alpha, moving to join them. "My grandfather's stories spoke of such partnerships, where the raw power of Alpha energy combined with Moonshade precision to accomplish what neither could alone." Thorn met Lila's gaze, understanding passing between them without words. The mate bond they had acknowledged but not completed could be their greatest weapon now. If fully activated, it would create a channel through which their energies could combine, amplifying both. "It would mean completing our bond," Thorn said quietly. "Here now, rather than in the ceremony we planned." "Under less than ideal circumstances," Lila agreed, a small smile touching her lips despite the gravity of their situation. "But when has anything about our relationship followed the expected path?" Around them, the effects of Elder Blackwood's blood magic were becoming visible. Pack members throughout the clearing were beginning to move jerkily, their expressions reflecting horror as their bodies responded to commands their minds rejected. The visiting alphas and their guards formed a protective circle around Thorn and Lila, recognizing the significance of what they were attempting. "The sacred oak will amplify your connection," the russet-haired alpha advised. "Position yourselves at its base, where the roots connect to the earth." As they moved toward the ancient tree, Elder Blackwood's chanting reached a crescendo. The first unwillingly controlled wolves began advancing toward them, their movements mechanical, but their eyes pleading for intervention. Thorn's loyal guards engaged them carefully, using restraining tactics rather than deadly force against packmates who had no choice in their actions. At the sacred oak's base, Thorn and Lila faced each other, the chaos of the developing conflict temporarily distant as they focused on the bond between them. Without ceremony or pretense, Thorn cupped Lila's face between his large hands, his ice blue eyes capturing her pale blue gaze. "I choose you," he said simply, "as my mate, my Luna, my partner in all things, not for politics or convenience, but for love and truth and the future we will build together." "And I choose you," Lila responded, her hands coming to rest against his chest, feeling his heart's powerful rhythm beneath her palms. "As my mate, my alpha, my equal in all things. Not from obligation or necessity, but from love and trust and the bond the moon goddess created between us." The traditional words, spoken with absolute conviction, initiated the mating bond's completion. Energy surged between them, visible to all as a luminous connection forming at the point where their foreheads touched. The sacred oak responded, its ancient energy flowing into them, amplifying the natural bond forming between alpha and true mate. Lila guided Thorn's energy with moonshade precision, focusing their combined power against the blood magic controlling their packmates. When their lips finally met in the kiss that sealed their bond, a pulse of pure energy radiated outward from the sacred oak, washing over the clearing like a spiritual tsunami. The effect on Elder Blackwood's magic was immediate and devastating. Throughout the clearing, bindings shattered visibly, releasing wolves from unwanted control. Pack members stumbled, disoriented but free, as the dark energy that had compelled them dissolved under the combined force of alpha power and moonshade direction. Elder Blackwood's protective barrier collapsed, leaving the council members exposed as their blood magic unraveled. The elder himself staggered backward, his face contorting with rage and disbelief as centuries of carefully constructed control disintegrated in moments. "This isn't over," he snarled, his voice distorted by the remnants of dark energy still clinging to him. "The black vein extends beyond Ironwood, beyond any territory you can protect. We will return, and when we do, there will be no mercy for traitors or moonshade witches." Before anyone could reach him, Elder Blackwood slashed his palm again, this time pressing the bleeding wound against a medallion identical to the one Lila had used in her revelation. The symbol flared with sickly light, and the elder vanished in a swirl of shadow, his physical form dissolving as he activated an escape mechanism prepared for exactly this contingency. 2 council members managed to activate similar devices before they could be apprehended, but the remaining 3 were quickly surrounded and restrained. The immediate threat neutralized, Thorn turned his attention to the assembled pack members. Many still disoriented from their sudden freedom from control they hadn't known existed. "Today you have witnessed both the darkest betrayal and the dawn of a new era for the Ironwood Pack," he announced, his voice carrying the undeniable authority of an alpha whose power had been enhanced rather than diminished by recent events. "For generations, the Black Vein Council has manipulated our decisions, bound our children, and eliminated those who threatened their control. Today, those bindings are broken." He extended his hand to Lila, who moved to stand beside him, their newly formed mate bond humming with energy that was visible to all wolves present. "With my true mate at my side, with the blessing of 3 neutral alphas as witnesses, I declare the Black Vein Council dissolved and its remaining members subject to justice under traditional pack law." The visiting alphas stepped forward, formally acknowledging Thorn's declaration and adding their own pledge of support against any future Black Vein activity within their territories. Their unified front represented a significant shift in pack politics. Territories that had maintained cautious separation for generations, now binding together against a common enemy. As the formal proceedings concluded, Caleb returned with the children, who rushed to embrace both Thorn and Lila with unrestrained enthusiasm. Logan reached Thorn first, his small arms wrapping around his father's leg, while Ava and the twins swarmed Lila, their faces alight with relief and joy. "The bad people are gone?" Eva asked, her voice stronger than Lila had ever heard it. "Some escaped," Lila answered honestly, knowing these children deserved truth after enduring so much deception. "But their power is broken, and we'll be watching for their return." Logan looked up at his father with serious eyes that seemed too old for his young face. "We felt it when you and Mama Lila connected. It was like the whole forest was singing." "That was the mate bond completing," Thorn explained, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. "When true mates accept each other fully, the moon goddess blesses their union with special strength." "So Mama Lila is really our mama now?" Logan pressed. "Forever?" "Forever," Thorn confirmed, his gaze meeting Lila's over the children's heads, the love and commitment in his ice-blue eyes unmistakable. "We are a family now, bound by choice and blessed by the moon goddess herself. Whatever challenges come next, we face them together." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting the sacred clearing in golden light, the newly bonded family remained at the sacred oak's base, surrounded by loyal pack members and allied alphas. The day's events had irrevocably altered pack dynamics throughout the region, exposing centuries of manipulation while simultaneously creating new alliances against darkness. For Lila Moonshade, once invisible and alone, the transformation was most profound. In the space of 2 weeks, she had emerged from hiding, reclaimed her heritage, freed 4 children from spiritual bondage, completed a true mate bond with an alpha, and helped expose a conspiracy spanning generations. Her grandmother's prophecy about the Moonshade line emerging from shadow had been fulfilled in ways neither of them could have imagined. Yet even as she celebrated their victory, Lila remained aware that Elder Blackwood's escape represented a dangerous loose end. The Black Vein Council's influence extended beyond Ironwood territory. their dark practices embedded in pack structures they had manipulated for centuries. The battle won today was significant, but the war against such entrenched corruption had only just begun. That awareness did nothing to diminish the joy of the moment. Her mate's strong presence beside her, the children's loving acceptance, the freedom to use her abilities openly after generations of hiding. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together, Alpha and Luna, bound by love and strengthened by truth, protectors of a pack entering a new era of authentic connection and spiritual freedom. Dawn broke over Ironwood territory 3 days after the confrontation at the Sacred Oak. Shafts of golden light filtered through ancient pines, illuminating a pack transformed. Throughout the compound, wolves moved with new awareness, many still adjusting to the sudden absence of bindings they hadn't known were influencing their thoughts and actions for years. The atmosphere vibrated with a strange mixture of liberation and uncertainty as pack members reconciled their newfound spiritual freedom with the disturbing reality of how long they had been controlled. In the Alpha's quarters, Lila stood before a mirror in what had once been Sophia's dressing room, now hastily prepared for her use. The formal Luna robes draped over her slender frame shimmered with silver embroidery against midnight blue fabric, Ironwood Pack's traditional colors. Her platinum blonde hair had been arranged in an elegant style that incorporated braids symbolizing her dual status as Luna and Moonshade Heir, while a delicate silver circlet rested against her forehead, marking her official position. The transformation from invisible nursery worker to Luna had occurred with dizzying speed. Just 3 days earlier, she had completed the mate bond with Thorn beneath the Sacred Oak, their union blessed by 3 visiting alphas and witnessed by much of the pack. The emergency had necessitated an accelerated timeline, bypassing traditional courtship rituals in favor of immediate action against the Black Vein Council's threat. Now, as she prepared for her formal introduction to the pack and visiting delegations, Lila struggled to reconcile her reflection with her self-image. The woman in the mirror looked regal, confident, powerful, nothing like the careful invisibility she had cultivated for 23 years. A soft knock preceded Eva's entrance, the 6-year-old girl wearing a formal dress that complemented Lila's robes. Since the binding's removal, Eva had blossomed, her formerly silent demeanor replaced by cautious expressiveness that grew stronger each day. "You look beautiful, Mama Lila," she said, approaching to touch the ceremonial robes with reverent fingers. "Like the moon princess in the stories." Lila smiled, kneeling to Eva's level despite the formal attire. "And you look like a princess yourself. How are your brothers doing?" "Logan is helping Father greet the important people," Eva reported seriously. "The twins are with Caleb. They're excited about the ceremony, but Max kept trying to eat his formal necklace." The normalcy of the moment, a mother and daughter preparing for an important event, discussing family logistics, struck Lila with unexpected poignancy. Just weeks ago, she had been alone, deliberately forgettable, expecting to live out her days in cautious isolation. Now she stood at the center of pack politics, responsible not just for 4 children who had claimed her heart, but for an entire community emerging from generations of spiritual manipulation. "There you are," Thorn's deep voice came from the doorway, where he stood resplendent in alpha ceremonial attire, black with silver and blue accents that matched Lila's robes, his powerful frame emphasized by the formal cut. The sight of him still sent a ripple of awareness through Lila, their mate bond humming with recognition and connection that had only strengthened since its completion. "The delegations are assembled," he continued, his ice-blue eyes warming as they took in Lila and Eva together, including an unexpected arrival from the Northern Territories. Lila straightened, smoothing her robes with suddenly nervous hands. "Northern Territories? I thought their alpha declined the invitation." "He did," Thorn confirmed, moving into the room to stand before his mate, adjusting the silver circlet with gentle fingers. But his emissary arrived an hour ago with an urgent message. Apparently, news of what happened here has spread further than we anticipated. The implications weren't lost on Lila. The Northern Territories had maintained strict isolation for generations, refusing involvement in the politics of other packs. Their sudden interest suggested the confrontation with the Black Vein Council had ripple effects extending far beyond Ironwood borders. "Is it a threat?" she asked quietly, conscious of Eva still standing beside her. Thorn's expression revealed nothing to the child, though the subtle tension in his jaw spoke volumes to Lila. "Not explicitly, but their timing is significant. We'll discuss it after the ceremony." He knelt to address Eva with a smile that effectively ended the serious discussion. "Would you like to escort your new mother to the ceremonial grounds, Princess Eva? It would be a very important job." Eva's face lit with pride as she nodded solemnly. "I can do it, Father. I practiced walking slowly like you showed me." "Perfect," Thorn approved, his large hand gentle as he brushed a strand of hair from his daughter's face. "Logan will walk with me, and you'll walk with Mama Lila. The twins will come with Caleb just behind you." His gaze returned to Lila, conveying silent support. "Ready?" Lila drew a steadying breath, pushing aside concerns about Northern Territory emissaries to focus on the immediate challenge. "Ready," she confirmed, taking Eva's small hand in hers. "Let's introduce the pack to their Luna." The ceremonial grounds had been transformed since the confrontation 3 days earlier. Where chaos and revelation had reigned, now stood orderly rows of seating arranged around a central dais. Pack members filled most spaces, while delegations from neighboring territories occupied positions of honor near the front. The visiting alphas, who had witnessed the mate bond's formation, sat on a raised platform to one side, their presence lending legitimacy to the accelerated transition of power. Most notable was a small contingent seated slightly apart from the others, 5 wolves wearing the distinctive gray and silver of the Northern Territories. Their leader, a severe woman with streaks of silver in her dark hair, watched the proceedings with analytical intensity, her gaze lingering on Lila with particular interest as the royal family processed toward the dais. Thorn led with Logan at his side, the 4-year-old boy managing a remarkably dignified pace despite his youth. Behind them came Lila with Eva, followed by Caleb carrying both twins, who had been deemed too young for the lengthy walk. As they passed, pack members bowed their heads respectfully, many watching Lila with expressions ranging from curiosity to hope to lingering wariness. Upon reaching the dais, Thorn took his position at its center, with Logan standing proudly at his right side. Lila and Eva ascended to join them, completing the family tableau that would be formalized through the coming ceremony. The symbolism wasn't subtle. The Alpha King, with his heir and Luna, presenting a unified front of legitimate leadership to replace the shadow governance that had controlled the pack for generations. Elder Franklin, who had replaced Elder Blackwood as ceremonial leader, stepped forward to begin the proceedings. At 75, Franklin had served the pack his entire life, remaining on the council's periphery rather than its inner circle, a position that had kept him free from the worst corruptions while giving him enough authority to step forward in the current crisis. "Wolves of Ironwood and honored guests," Franklin began, his voice carrying clearly across the grounds. "We gather today for a ceremony unprecedented in our history. The formal recognition of a true mate bond between our Alpha and a daughter of the Moonshade line, once thought lost to us forever." Murmurs rippled through the crowd at the explicit mention of Lila's heritage. For generations, the Moonshade name had been spoken only in whispers, if at all. Now it was being proclaimed publicly, a deliberate rejection of the suppression that had characterized the Black Vein Council's reign. 3 days ago, Franklin continued, many of us witnessed the formation of this bond beneath the sacred oak, a union blessed by the moon goddess herself and acknowledged by 3 neighboring alphas. Today, we formalize what the goddess has already decreed, the elevation of Lila Moonshade to her rightful position as Luna of the Ironwood Pack. He turned to Thorn, beginning the traditional exchange that had marked Luna ceremonies for generations. "Alpha Thorn, son of Alaric, protector of Ironwood territory, do you present this wolf as your chosen mate, your Luna, the mother of your children, to be acknowledged by all under your protection?" Thorn's voice rang with quiet authority. I present Lila Moonshade as my true mate, chosen by the moon goddess, accepted with my full heart and spirit to stand as Luna, as mother to my children, as my equal partner in all things." Franklin nodded, turning next to Lila. "Lila Moonshade, last daughter of an ancient line, do you accept the responsibilities of Luna? To guide and protect this pack alongside your mate, to nurture its children, to uphold its laws, to defend its territory with your life if necessary?" Lila's voice remained steady, despite the significance of the moment. "I accept these responsibilities freely and completely. I pledge myself to this pack, to its alpha, to our children, to the defense of our territory and the welfare of all who dwell within it." "And do you further accept the unique responsibility that comes with your heritage?" Franklin asked, deviating slightly from traditional script to acknowledge Lila's Moonshade lineage. "Do you pledge to use your inherited gifts for the pack's benefit, to heal spiritual wounds, to detect manipulation, to teach what was nearly lost so that it may never be forgotten again?" The additional pledge represented a significant shift, openly acknowledging abilities that had been suppressed for generations, transforming what had once been feared into a recognized asset. Lila felt the weight of history as she responded. "I pledge to use the Moonshade gifts as they were intended, to heal, to protect, to guide. I will restore what was hidden, teach what was suppressed, and ensure that the spiritual balance of our pack remains true to the moon goddess's design." Satisfied, Franklin turned to address the assembled wolves. "Witnesses of pack and allied territories, do you acknowledge this bond and pledge your respect to Luna Lila Moonshade, accepting her authority as equal to Alpha Thorns in all matters concerning pack welfare?" The response came as a unified affirmation, though Lila noted the Northern Territory delegation remained silent, observing rather than participating. Their neutrality was neither support nor opposition, a position consistent with their historical isolation, but noteworthy in its deliberateness. Franklin completed the ceremony with the traditional blessing, invoking the moon goddess's continued favor on the union, while placing a ceremonial cloak of protection around both Thorn and Lila's shoulders, symbolically uniting them beneath a single mantle. As the formal portion concluded, Thorn surprised many by lifting Logan onto the dais beside them, then gesturing for Caleb to bring the twins forward as well. "The strength of a pack lies not just in its leadership, but in its future," Thorn announced, his hand resting on Logan's shoulder while Lila stood with Eva and the twins. "These children represent that future, a generation that will grow without the spiritual bindings that constrained so many of us. A generation that will know the truth of our history, both the darkness we have overcome and the light we move toward." It was a powerful statement, reminding the pack that the recent revelations affected not just current governance, but the welfare of all future generations. The assembled wolves responded with approval, many parents drawing their own children closer as they contemplated the implications of raising young ones free from the subtle manipulations that had influenced their own development. As the ceremonial portion concluded and the gathering transitioned toward celebration, Thorn leaned close to Lila, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "The Northern Emissary has requested a private audience, immediately." Lila nodded slightly, maintaining her public smile while processing this information. The urgency suggested something beyond mere diplomatic acknowledgement. "The children?" "Caleb will take them to the nursery," Thorn replied. "We'll meet the emissary in my study in 10 minutes." They moved through the post-ceremonial interactions with practiced efficiency, accepting congratulations and well wishes while gradually making their way toward the edge of the gathering. Lila found herself receiving particular attention from older pack members who approached with emotional stories of moonshades they had known in their youth, grandparents who had possessed the sight before mysteriously disappearing, cousins who had shown unusual spiritual sensitivity before being sent away for training and never returning. The pattern of systematic elimination became clearer with each account, reinforcing the scope of what the Black Vein Council had accomplished over generations. By the time they extracted themselves and reached Thorn's study, Lila's mind was racing with implications. The Northern Territory delegation's unexpected appearance coupled with these emerging stories of moonshade elimination, suggested connections she hadn't previously considered. The northern emissary awaited them, the severe woman Lila had noticed during the ceremony. Up close, she appeared older than initial impression suggested, her features bearing the subtle markers of a wolf well into her second century. Such longevity was rare, but not unheard of among their kind, usually indicating exceptional spiritual strength or unique genetic factors. Alpha Thorn, the woman acknowledged with a respectful nod. Luna Moonshade, I am Eveline, spiritual guardian of the Northern Territories. Her gaze lingered on Lila, assessing in a way that felt almost familiar. Or perhaps I should say cousin. The word hung in the air between them, its implications enormous. Thorn tensed beside Lila, his protective instincts responding to this unexpected development. Cousin? Lila repeated carefully. I was told no moonshades survived outside Ironwood territory. A smile touched Eveline's stern features, softening them momentarily. The Black Vein Council was thorough in their elimination efforts, but not infallible. Some of us escaped to the Northern Territories centuries ago, where isolation and careful concealment allowed our bloodline to continue. We've been watching Ironwood territory for generations, waiting for signs that the balance might be restored. She withdrew an object from within her robes, a crystalline orb identical to the one Lila had used during the revelation ceremony. This belongs to you by right of succession. It is one of 7 moonshade anchors, tools created by our ancestors to amplify and focus our natural abilities. When you used its twin 3 days ago, every moonshade still living felt the resonance. Lila accepted the orb with reverent hands, feeling its energy respond to her touch. There are more survivors? More than just you? 17 full-blooded moonshades remain in the Northern Territories, Eveline confirmed, plus another 34 with mixed heritage who carry some measure of our abilities. We have preserved the knowledge, the techniques, the history that the Black Vein Council tried to erase, and now we've come to offer that knowledge to you. The revelation left Lila momentarily speechless. After believing herself the last of her kind, the sole carrier of a nearly extinguished bloodline, the discovery of others, an entire community of moonshades, was overwhelming. The implications extended beyond personal significance to pack politics, regional stability, and the ongoing threat from the escaped council members. Thorn found his voice first. Why now? If you've been watching for generations, why reveal yourselves at this particular moment? Eveline's expression darkened. Because Elder Blackwood's escape changes everything. He was never merely a council member, Alpha Thorn. He is the vessel for something far more dangerous, an entity our ancestors called the Shadow Cord, a spiritual parasite that feeds on control and fear. It has jumped from host to host through generations of council leaders, growing stronger with each transfer. She turned to Lila, her gaze intensifying. When you broke the bindings on the royal children and completed your mate bond with the Alpha, you didn't just disrupt the Council's power structure. You wounded the Shadow Cord directly, forcing it to retreat before it was ready. Now it will seek to rebuild its strength and return with greater force than before. Lila's mind raced with the implications. The dark energy she had sensed during the revelation ceremony hadn't originated with Elder Blackwood, but rather worked through him, a distinction that explained the unnatural power behind the Council's manipulations. It wasn't merely corrupt wolves misusing spiritual techniques, it was something older and darker, using wolves as tools. How do we fight something like that? Lila asked, practical concerns overriding the shock of Eveline's revelations. If it survived for generations by transferring between hosts, how can it be permanently defeated? That, Eveline replied with grim satisfaction, is precisely why I'm here. The Shadow Cord has one critical vulnerability. It can only be destroyed during transition between hosts, when it exists momentarily without physical protection. Our ancestors discovered this weakness, but lacked the combined power necessary to exploit it. A true mate bond between an alpha and a moonshade creates exactly the kind of spiritual resonance that could sever the cord permanently. Thorn moved to stand beside Lila, their shoulders touching in silent solidarity. "You're suggesting we could destroy this entity? Permanently?" "With proper preparation and the right circumstances, yes." Eveline produced a leather-bound journal from her bag, placing it on Thorn's desk. "This contains the accumulated knowledge of generations of moonshades who have studied the shadow cord's nature. Elder Blackwood will seek a new host soon. His body was already failing before your confrontation, and the effort of escape will have accelerated that decline. The transition typically occurs on the night of the dark moon, when spiritual barriers are naturally thinner." "The dark moon is in 5 days," Lila noted, her knowledge of lunar cycles instinctive after years of moonshade training with her grandmother. Eveline nodded. "Which gives us very little time to prepare. The shadow cord will be drawn to power. It will seek another alpha or elder with significant influence. Most likely, it will approach Cassidy of the Redwood Pack, whose position and resentment make her an ideal vessel." The mention of Cassidy redirected Lila's thoughts to the Omega who had nearly become Thorn's mate through political arrangement. Following the revelation at the Sacred Oak, Cassidy and her family had withdrawn to their territory without formal comment, their silence more concerning than any explicit threat. If Eveline's theory proved correct, they represented the most likely vector for the Shadow Cord's return. "We should warn them," Lila suggested, thinking of the Redwood Pack members who would be equally vulnerable to manipulation. "Whatever Cassidy's involvement with the Council, her pack doesn't deserve to become hosts for this entity." Thorn considered this with alpha practicality. A direct warning might be dismissed as political maneuvering. We need evidence they can't ignore. He turned to Eveline. "Does your journal contain means of detecting the Shadow Cord's presence? Something that could be demonstrated to skeptical wolves?" "It does," Eveline confirmed. "A revelation ritual similar to what Lila performed, but focused specifically on parasitic spiritual attachments. With proper preparation, even non-moonshades can witness the results." "Then we prepare for 2 scenarios," Thorn decided, his strategic mind quickly adapting to these new revelations. First, a diplomatic mission to the Redwood Pack to warn them of potential danger. Second, a defensive response if the warning comes too late and the Shadow Cord successfully transitions to a new host. Lila nodded agreement, then addressed the question that had been forming since Eveline's arrival. "The training you mentioned for moonshades who survived, could that be extended to our territory? To any pack members who might carry latent abilities?" Eveline's expression softened into something approaching approval. "That is precisely what we hope to offer, cousin. Not just training for yourself, but identification and education for any with moonshade heritage, however diluted. The time for hiding our abilities has passed. If the Shadow Cord is to be defeated permanently, moonshade practices must become integrated into pack life once again, as they were centuries ago before the corruption began." The conversation continued late into the evening, with Eveline sharing critical information about moonshade history and techniques that Lila's grandmother had never been able to pass on. The scope of what had been lost, and what might now be recovered, was staggering. Generations of spiritual knowledge, healing practices, and protective techniques had been systematically suppressed by the Black Vein Council, leaving packs vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation they had endured. By the time they concluded, a plan had formed, ambitious but necessary given the compressed timeline. Thorn would lead a diplomatic mission to the Redwood Pack the following day, bringing evidence of the Shadow Cord's existence and offering alliance against this common threat. Meanwhile, Lila would begin intensive training with Eveline, preparing for the confrontation that seemed increasingly inevitable despite their diplomatic efforts. The next morning dawned clear and cold, as Thorn prepared to depart with a small delegation, including 2 of the visiting alphas who had witnessed the original confrontation. Their presence would lend credibility to Thorn's warnings, preventing the Redwood Pack from dismissing the information as political maneuvering following the broken arrangement with Cassidy. Lila stood with the children in the compound's central courtyard, watching as final preparations were made for the journey. Though they had been mated less than a week, the prospect of separation, even briefly, created a physical ache that resonated through their bond. The intensity of their connection had surprised them both. True mate bonds were rare enough that few could describe their effects accurately, and the addition of moonshade sensitivity made Lila's experience particularly acute. 3 days, Thorn promised, his forehead touching hers in the traditional gesture of mated wolves. Sooner if possible. His ice-blue eyes held both determination and reluctance as he added, "If anything changes here, if you sense any threat or unusual activity, send word immediately. Don't wait. Don't investigate alone." "I have Eveline and the Northern delegation," Lila reminded him, "and Caleb's security protocols have been doubled. We'll be safe until you return." She didn't voice the concern that troubled her most, that Thorn's mission might place him directly in the Shadow Cord's path as it sought a new host. That worry remained private, shared only through the subtle pressure of her hands against his chest. Logan tugged at his father's sleeve, his small face serious. "Bring back something from Redwood territory," he requested. "A pine cone or a special rock for my collection." Thorn smiled, kneeling to his son's level. "I promise. And you promise to help Mama Lila with your brothers and sister while I'm gone? To be the alpha of the nursery?" Logan nodded solemnly, accepting this responsibility with characteristic seriousness. Eva and the twins clustered around next, receiving their own reassurances and instructions before Thorn finally mounted his horse, leading his delegation through the compound gates and into the forest beyond. Lila watched until they disappeared from view, then turned to the children with a brightness she didn't entirely feel. "Well then, who's ready for special training with Cousin Eveline? She's going to teach us all about moonshade history today." The mention of Eveline sparked immediate interest. The Northern emissary had made a strong impression on the royal children during her brief interactions, her formal manner softening noticeably around them. For Logan especially, the discovery of an extended family connection through Lila had been fascinating, prompting endless questions about Northern Territory customs and whether they had children his age to play with. The morning passed in structured activity. Eveline proved to be an excellent teacher, adapting complex moonshade concepts into forms the children could understand. Even the twins remained engaged as she used simple exercises to demonstrate energy awareness, games that doubled as preliminary training for any latent abilities they might have inherited through their connection to Lila. By afternoon, the children had been settled for their rest period, allowing Lila and Eveline to progress to more advanced techniques. They worked in a specially prepared chamber beneath the Alpha's residence, a space once used for moonshade training centuries earlier, according to pack histories Sophia had uncovered before her death. The room's circular design and crystalline inlays enhanced spiritual energy, making it ideal for the intensive preparation Lila required. "Your natural ability is exceptional," Eveline noted as Lila successfully completed a complex detection pattern for the 3rd time. "Even without formal training, your instinctive understanding of energy flows exceeds most moonshades with years of practice." Lila absorbed the praise with measured satisfaction. "My grandmother managed to teach me more than I realized through stories and games that seemed innocent but contained embedded techniques. And caring for traumatized children provided practical experience in emotional healing, even if I didn't fully understand the spiritual components." "The Council's greatest error was allowing you to work in the nursery," Eveline observed with grim amusement. "They thought placing you in a low-status position minimized your threat, never realizing it provided perfect conditions to develop your inherent abilities." She adjusted the crystalline arrangement before them, creating a new pattern. "This configuration is specifically designed to detect parasitic entities like the Shadow Cord. Practice until the resonance pattern becomes instinctive." As Lila worked through the exercise, her awareness extended outward from the training room, moving through the pack compound in spiraling patterns. The technique allowed her to monitor for unusual energy signatures while continuing her physical training, a multitasking skill essential for maintaining vigilance during the vulnerable days before the dark moon. Her expanded awareness suddenly encountered an anomaly, an energy signature approaching the nursery that triggered immediate alarm. It wasn't the Shadow Cord itself, but something carried its distinctive taint, like an object that had remained too long in proximity to corruption. Lila straightened, the training exercise forgotten. "Something's wrong. The nursery—" She was moving before completing the sentence, Eveline following closely as they ascended from the training room to the main level of the Alpha's residence. Caleb met them in the corridor, his expression confirming Lila's sense of urgency. "Cassidy has arrived," he reported tersely, "alone requesting sanctuary. She appears injured and disoriented." The news was both unexpected and concerning. Cassidy's presence in Ironwood territory while Thorn journeyed to Redwood Pack created diplomatic complications, but her condition suggested something beyond political maneuvering. "Where is she now?" Lila asked, already moving toward the nursery where her first priority, the children, were completing their afternoon rest. "Guest quarters in the eastern wing," Caleb replied. "Under guard, as protocol requires for unexpected visitors. She's asking specifically to speak with you, Luna." This final detail elevated Lila's concern to genuine alarm. Cassidy had shown no previous interest in Lila beyond cold dismissal. For her to request a meeting now, when relations between the packs remained strained, suggested either desperation or deception. "Have the children move to the secure room we prepared," Lila instructed. "Then inform Cassidy I'll meet with her shortly." She turned to Eveline. "Would you recognize signs of Shadow Cord influence?" "Immediately," Eveline confirmed. "Though if she's merely carrying contaminated objects rather than hosting the entity itself, the signs would be more subtle." "Then you'll accompany me," Lila decided. "As a neutral observer from the Northern Territories, your presence keeps this diplomatic while providing necessary security." When they entered the guest quarters 20 minutes later, Lila's first impression was shock at Cassidy's transformation. The proud, coldly beautiful Omega, who had once been selected as Thorn's political match, now appeared haggard and frightened, her elegant clothing torn and dirty, her dark hair tangled around a face marked with scratches and bruising. She rose unsteadily as Lila entered, attempting a formal greeting that dissolved into a fit of coughing. Eveline remained near the door, her posture alert, while her gaze assessed Cassidy with moonshade precision. "Luna, Lila," Cassidy managed finally, her voice hoarse. "Thank you for seeing me. I know my presence here is complicated." "You appear to have traveled under difficult circumstances," Lila observed neutrally, maintaining formal distance while her moonshade senses evaluated the other woman. The tainted energy she'd detected earlier emanated from a medallion hanging around Cassidy's neck, an object nearly identical to the one Elder Blackwood had used during his escape. "I fled," Cassidy stated bluntly. 3 days ago, after Elder Blackwood arrived at our territory seeking asylum, something happened during his private meeting with my father. Afterward, my father wasn't himself anymore. His eyes, his voice, everything changed." Her hands trembled as she continued. "He ordered me confined to my quarters until the dark moon, when I would serve a greater purpose, as he phrased it. I escaped through a servant's passage last night." The account aligned with Eveline's predictions about the Shadow Cord's movements, though the specifics created new concerns. If Cassidy's father, Alpha Richard of the Redwood Pack, had already become the entity's new host, Thorn was riding directly into significant danger. "The medallion you're wearing," Lila noted carefully. "Where did you get it?" Cassidy's hand moved unconsciously to the object. "My father gave it to me months ago, instructing me to wear it always. He said it would help ensure our alliance with Ironwood succeeded." Her expression clouded. "I've tried to remove it several times since fleeing, but it seems attached somehow. It burns when I touch it directly." Eveline moved forward at this, her expression grave. "May I examine it without touching you?" she added when Cassidy flinched back nervously. After a hesitant nod from Cassidy, Eveline used a ceremonial wand to lift the medallion slightly, revealing intricate engravings around its circumference. The symbols matched those Lila had observed in Elder Blackwood's binding designs, confirming their suspicions about its purpose. "It's a control talisman," Eveline explained, addressing Lila rather than Cassidy directly. "Designed to make the wearer susceptible to influence from whoever created it. Not possession, but a form of spiritual tethering that allows for subtle manipulation over distance." Cassidy's face drained of remaining color. Are you saying my father, or whoever my father has become, has been controlling me through this? Influencing, not controlling completely, Eveline corrected. Your genuine thoughts and feelings would remain, but certain impulses would be amplified while others were suppressed. Your antipathy toward the royal children, for instance, was that consistent with your normal personality? The question struck a visible chord with Cassidy, whose expression shifted from fear to dawning comprehension. I've always loved children. Before coming to Ironwood, I volunteered in our pack's nursery regularly, but when I met Thorne's children, I felt this inexplicable aversion, this sense they were somehow wrong or dangerous. Her voice faltered. I didn't understand it. It felt alien even as I was experiencing it. Lila and Eveline exchanged meaningful glances. The manipulation extended further than they had initially suspected, suggesting Cassidy herself had been another victim rather than a willing participant in the Council's schemes. We can remove the medallion, Lila offered, though the process isn't entirely comfortable and you'll need to remain in isolation briefly afterward as your natural energy patterns reestablish themselves. Please, Cassidy responded immediately. Whatever it takes. I just want to be myself again. She hesitated, then added with visible effort, and I need to warn Alpha Thorne. My father knows he's coming. There's an ambush planned at Silver Creek Crossing where the territories meet. The warning galvanized Lila into immediate action. While Eveline prepared for the medallion's removal, Lila dispatched Caleb to organize a secondary delegation to intercept Thorne before he reached the ambush point. The diplomatic complexity was enormous. Entering Redwood territory without invitation could be interpreted as an act of aggression, but the alternative was allowing Thorne to ride into a trap set by an entity that had already demonstrated its lethal capabilities. Hours later, as twilight descended over Ironwood territory, Lila stood with Eveline in the training room, finalizing preparations for their most ambitious undertaking yet. With Cassidy resting comfortably after the medallion's removal, their focus had shifted to establishing spiritual contact with Thorne, a technique that, while theoretically possible through the mate bond, required exceptional focus and energy. The connection is strongest if you begin with a physical object belonging to him, Eveline instructed, arranging crystalline amplifiers around Lila, who sat cross-legged at the room's center. Lila withdrew a small object from her pocket, a carved wooden wolf Thorne always carried, which he had pressed into her hand before departing, claiming it would return with him at journey's end. The carving held his energy signature strongly, providing the anchor point Lila needed for the complex connection. Focus first on the mate bond itself, Eveline continued. Feel its resonance, its unique frequency, then extend your awareness along that connection, like following a thread through darkness. Lila closed her eyes, centering her attention on the bond that hummed constantly at the edge of her consciousness, the spiritual tether connecting her to Thorne regardless of physical distance. Since their union beneath the sacred oak, the bond had strengthened daily, becoming a presence as natural as breathing. Now she focused on it exclusively, feeling its vibration, its warmth, its distinctive signature that was uniquely Thorne. Gradually, her awareness extended outward, following the bond's path northeast toward Redwood territory. The sensation resembled flying, her consciousness skimming over forests and streams, moving faster than physical travel would allow. Distance blurred until suddenly she sensed him, Thorne's distinctive energy, powerful and familiar, currently in motion through dense forest. Pushing further, Lila attempted to establish direct communication, the most challenging aspect of the technique. Most mate bonds allowed general emotional sensing over distance, but true communication required exceptional spiritual alignment, particularly from the non-moonshade partner who lacked inherent sensitivity. Thorne. The thought projected along their connection, carrying intent and urgency rather than words alone. Danger. Ambush at Silver Creek. Richard possessed. Return immediately. For several heartbeats, she sensed no response, only the continued movement of his energy signature. Then, like a radio suddenly tuning to the correct frequency, she felt his recognition, surprise followed by focused attention as he received her warning. No words came back, but the immediate change in his movement pattern confirmed reception. his energy signature shifted direction, no longer proceeding toward redwood territory, but moving laterally, avoiding the planned ambush point. Relief flooded Lila as she withdrew from the connection, returning her awareness to the training room where Eveline watched with approval. "He received it," Lila confirmed, her voice slightly hoarse from the effort. "They're changing course." "Impressive for your first attempt at long-distance communication," Eveline noted. "The mate bond between you is exceptionally strong, which will serve well when confronting the shadow cord directly." Lila rose, stretching muscles stiffened by prolonged stillness. "That confrontation seems increasingly inevitable. If Richard of Redwood Pack is already hosting the entity, diplomatic solutions become nearly impossible. The most effective approach would be intervention during the next transition," Eveline agreed. "When Richard's body inevitably fails under the strain of hosting the shadow cord, we would have a brief window to strike before it secures another vessel." The strategy made tactical sense, but carried ethical complications that troubled Lila deeply. "Richard is a victim in this, just as Elder Blackwood became one before him. Is there no way to separate host from parasite without destroying both?" Eveline's expression softened with unexpected compassion. "That question has haunted Moonshades for generations. The journal contains theoretical approaches, but none have been successfully implemented. The shadow cord integrates too thoroughly with its host's spiritual structure for clean separation." The implications weighed heavily as Lila prepared for bed that night, checking on each child before retiring to the quarters she now shared with Thorn. The empty space beside her felt particularly acute given the day's developments, the mate bond humming with tension despite the successful warning she'd conveyed. She had nearly drifted to sleep when the bond suddenly flared with alarming intensity. Lila sat bolt upright, her senses expanding instinctively to track Thorn's position. His energy signature registered clearly, much closer than expected, moving rapidly toward Ironwood's central compound. Not the measured pace of a returning delegation, but the urgent speed of emergency. Within minutes, the compound's alert horn sounded, confirming what she'd already sensed through the bond. Lila dressed quickly, summoning Caleb to ensure the children remained secured before making her way to the main courtyard where Thorn and his delegation had just arrived, their horses lathered with sweat from hard riding. Thorn dismounted in a fluid motion that belied his exhaustion, crossing the distance between them in long strides. When he reached her, his arms enfolded her with desperate strength, the physical contact intensifying their bond's resonance after hours of separation. "Your warning saved us," he murmured against her hair. "We diverted just before reaching Silver Creek, then observed from cover as Richard's forces moved into position. It would have been a massacre." He pulled back slightly, his ice-blue eyes grave as he added, "But we also witnessed something that changes everything. Richard isn't just influenced by the shadow cord, he's physically transforming. Whatever this entity is, it's remaking him into something neither wolf nor human." The description sent a chill through Lila, connecting to obscure warnings in her grandmother's teachings about parasitic entities that eventually consumed their hosts completely. "How long since the transformation began?" "Based on Cassidy's timeline, 4 days at most," Thorn replied. "The physical changes were already visible: elongated limbs, darkened skin, eyes that reflected no light. His guards seemed either ensorcelled or terrified, following orders but maintaining maximum distance." Eveline joined them, having been summoned by the alert horns. Upon hearing Thorn's description, her expression hardened with grim recognition. "The consumption phase has begun earlier than expected. Normally, the shadow cord maintains its host's appearance until the dark moon, when the final transformation occurs. If visible changes are already manifesting, Richard's inherent resistance must be exceptional, forcing the entity to expend more energy subduing him." "Which means," Thorn prompted, "the transition to a new host will happen sooner than the dark moon," Eveline concluded, "possibly within hours rather than days, and when it occurs, the entity will be temporarily vulnerable, but also desperate, making it more dangerous than we anticipated." The strategic implications were immediate and concerning. With Richard's transformation accelerated, the Shadow Cord would seek a new host imminently, likely targeting Ironwood territory where powerful vessels, including Thorn himself, would present tempting options. Their defensive preparations, designed around the Dark Moon timeline, now required immediate implementation. Through the remainder of that night and into the following day, Ironwood Pack mobilized with disciplined urgency. Wolves with even trace Moonshade heritage were identified and positioned at key locations throughout the territory, their latent abilities temporarily enhanced through Eveline's techniques. Protective barriers using crystalline amplifiers were established around vulnerable areas, particularly the nursery where the royal children remained under guard. Most critically, Thorn and Lila completed intensive preparation for direct confrontation with the Shadow Cord during its vulnerable transition phase. Using techniques documented in Eveline's journal, they practiced synchronizing their energy through the mate bond, creating resonance patterns designed to disrupt the entity's structure before it could secure a new host. By midday, sentries reported unusual activity along Ironwood's northern border, movements that didn't follow natural wildlife patterns nor typical patrol routes. By evening, the reports intensified. Strange lights observed in the forest, wolves moving with unnatural coordination, and most alarmingly, wildlife fleeing southward en masse, as if escaping some approaching presence. As night fell, Thorn and Lila stood on the Alpha residence's highest balcony, surveying the territory spread before them. To the north, an unnatural darkness had begun gathering, obscuring stars and consuming moonlight in a spreading void that defied natural explanation. "It's coming," Lila said quietly, her moonshade senses vibrating with recognition. Not just Richard or his wolves, but the Shadow Cord itself, preparing for transition. Thorn's arm tightened around her waist, their physical contact strengthening the bond they would rely on in the coming confrontation. Then we meet it as planned, at the Sacred Oak, with all our preparations in place. "The children?" Lila questioned, maternal concern overriding tactical considerations momentarily. "Triple guarded in the secure chamber, with Eveline personally supervising their protection. The Shadow Cord won't reach them." Thorn turned Lila to face him, his hands framing her face with gentle intensity. "Whatever happens tonight, know that finding you, claiming you despite everything that stood between us, has been the greatest blessing of my life. Our bond has already changed the course of our pack's history, regardless of tonight's outcome." Lila leaned into his touch, absorbing his strength while offering her own in return. "We will succeed," she stated with quiet certainty. "Not just for ourselves or our children, but for every wolf who has suffered under the Shadow Cord's influence for generations. Tonight, we finish what my ancestors began." As they descended to prepare for the confrontation, Lila felt the weight of history and prophecy converging. Her grandmother's final words echoed in memory. "The white wolf brings either salvation or destruction." Tonight would determine which destiny prevailed, not just for Ironwood Pack, but for wolf societies throughout the region. The Sacred Oak stood sentinel in its clearing, ancient branches spread against the night sky like protective arms. Around its massive trunk, crystalline amplifiers had been positioned according to patterns documented in Eveline's journal, creating a spiritual containment field specifically designed to trap an entity during transition between hosts. Pack warriors maintained a perimeter further out, prepared to engage any physical threat, while Thorn and Lila focused on the spiritual confrontation. They stood together at the oak's base, formally dressed in ceremonial attire that symbolized their unified authority. Alpha and Luna, warrior and healer, physical and spiritual strength, combined through the mate bond that hummed between them with increasing resonance as they completed final preparations. "Movement approaching from the north," Caleb reported, returning from a scouting position at the clearing's edge. "A single figure, moving erratically, based on size and coloring, likely Alpha Richard." Thorn nodded acknowledgement. "Maintain distance, but keep him in sight. Report any changes immediately." As Caleb withdrew, Lila completed the arrangement of moonshade relics around them. the crystalline orb, silver dagger, and vial of sacred water, positioned to amplify their combined energy when the confrontation began. The preparations complete, she moved to stand beside Thorn, their hands joining as they faced the northern edge of the clearing where Richard would emerge. "Remember," she said quietly, "we must wait until the transition begins. Attacking while the shadow cord remains fully integrated with Richard would harm him without affecting the entity itself." Thorn squeezed her hand in acknowledgement, his focus narrowing as a figure appeared at the clearing's edge. The sight confirmed his earlier description while revealing how rapidly the transformation had progressed. What approached barely resembled Richard of Redwood Pack. Though bipedal, its proportions had stretched and distorted, limbs elongated beyond natural constraints, skin darkened to light-absorbing black, eyes gleaming with internal illumination that held no warmth or recognition. "Greetings, Alpha Thorn," the creature spoke, its voice a discordant blend of Richard's baritone and something ancient and cold. "And Luna Moonshade, how fitting that you await me together, bound as true mates, carrying the potential I have sought for centuries." The words sent a chill through Lila, though she maintained her position, sensing Thorn's tension beside her. "We know what you are," she responded evenly. "Not Richard, not even Wolf. A parasite that has survived by jumping between hosts, feeding on control and fear." A sound emerged from the creature that might have been laughter, though it held no mirth. "Such limited understanding. I am not parasite, but purpose, the necessary balance to your species' chaotic nature. For millennia, I have guided wolf packs toward order and stability, culling those whose abilities threatened necessary control. The Moonshades were particularly problematic, with their inconvenient talent for exposing my methods. It moved closer, its movements jerky and uncoordinated, as if the body it occupied fought against its control. "This vessel fails me, as all eventually do, but I have come for a superior replacement." Its gaze fixed on Thorn with naked hunger. An alpha in his prime, already connected to Moonshade energy through his mate bond, the perfect host to begin a new phase of my work. "You'll find me less accommodating than previous hosts," Thorn stated coldly, his hand tightening around Lila's. The creature's face contorted into an approximation of a smile. "Resistance is expected, but ultimately irrelevant. All hosts believe themselves exceptional until the binding is complete." Its attention shifted to Lila, eyes narrowing. "Though perhaps I have overlooked the more interesting option. A Moonshade host would provide unique advantages, despite your bloodline's traditional incompatibility." Lila maintained steady eye contact, monitoring the creature's energy patterns through her enhanced senses. Beneath the shadow cord's dominant presence, she detected Richard's fading life force, now compressed to a flicker barely sustaining his physical form. The transition would begin soon, necessity driving the entity to abandon its failing host, regardless of ideal timing. "Neither of us will host you," Lila stated with quiet certainty. "Your cycle ends tonight, Shadow Cord. The packs you've manipulated for generations will be free." The creature's expression twisted with contempt. "Freedom is chaos. Without my guidance, wolf packs degenerate into instinct-driven savagery. I brought order, purpose, advancement through selective development." Its form suddenly convulsed, Richard's remaining consciousness briefly surfacing in a spasm of resistance before being ruthlessly suppressed. "Your species requires governance. Without it, you destroy yourselves and everything around you." Another convulsion, more violent than the first, bent the creature nearly double. When it straightened, its cohesion had visibly degraded, portions of its form becoming translucent as the shadow cord's hold on Richard's body weakened critical thresholds. "Now," Lila whispered, recognizing the imminent transition. Together, they activated the containment field, channeling energy through their joined hands into the crystalline amplifiers surrounding the sacred oak. Light erupted from each crystal, forming connective beams that created a geometric pattern throughout the clearing, a spiritual cage designed to prevent the shadow cord from escaping once it emerged from Richard's failing body. The creature howled in rage and recognition, lunging forward in a desperate attempt to reach them before the transition completed. It crossed half the distance before another violent convulsion dropped it to its knees. This time, the disruption proved catastrophic to its physical cohesion. Richard's body collapsed entirely, dissolving into shadow that momentarily retained humanoid shape before beginning to separate from a darker core, the shadow cord itself finally visible in its true form. The entity resembled a writhing mass of black tendrils, constantly shifting and reconnecting with a denser central mass that pulsed with negative energy. As it fully emerged from Richard's disintegrating remains, the containment field activated completely, trapping it within a geometric prison of light. Immediate fury translated into a psychic assault that battered against their mental defenses, the entity projecting fear and doubt with millennia of practiced manipulation. Lila felt Thorn falter slightly beside her as the shadow cord targeted his deepest insecurities, fear of failing his pack, his children, his mate, just as he had failed to protect Sophia. Through their bond, she countered with absolute confidence, her trust and love creating a shield against the entity's psychological warfare. "Begin the severance," she instructed, guiding Thorn through the synchronized energy pattern they had practiced. Together they channeled power through the moonshade relics, creating harmonic disruption specifically calibrated to the shadow cord's unique frequency. The entity's form distorted under this assault, its tendrils thrashing with increasing desperation as it sought escape or new connection. Its psychic attacks intensified, bombarding them with nightmarish visions and emotional pain drawn from their own memories and fears. Lila maintained focus despite the onslaught, her moonshade training providing critical stability as she guided their combined energy with increasing precision. Thorn matched her perfectly, his alpha strength amplifying her technique, their mate bond creating synergy beyond what either could achieve alone. As the severance progressed, the shadow cord's form began fragmenting, portions dissolving into harmless energy that dissipated within the containment field. Its psychic assaults weakened correspondingly, coherent attacks deteriorating into primal expressions of rage and fear. Emotions the entity had fed upon for centuries now turned against itself. The final dissolution approached when a sudden surge of desperate energy from the shadow cord created unexpected backlash. The containment field flickered momentarily, allowing a single tendril to escape toward Thorn. Lila reacted instinctively, interposing herself between the entity and her mate. The tendril struck her chest, attempting immediate possession with the entity's remaining strength. For a critical moment, Lila felt the shadow cord's essence attempting to integrate with her own, ancient, cold, infinitely patient, and utterly alien. It offered knowledge, power, immortality of a sort through continued existence across multiple hosts. The temptation it presented was tailored with precision, targeting her deepest desires for security and belonging after a lifetime of isolation. But where previous hosts had faced this temptation alone, Lila stood strengthened by the mate bond. Thorn's presence within her consciousness provided immediate counterbalance, his love and commitment creating context that rendered the shadow cord's offers meaningless by comparison. With clarity born of complete spiritual alignment, Lila rejected the invasion, her moonshade abilities turning the connection back upon the entity itself. The reversal created fatal destabilization. The shadow cord's remaining cohesion collapsed, its essence fragmenting into components too small to maintain consciousness or identity. The dissolution accelerated until nothing remained but dissipating energy, harmlessly absorbed by the sacred oak that had witnessed centuries of pack history. As the containment field deactivated, Thorn caught Lila before she could collapse from exhaustion. The confrontation had demanded everything they had, individually and together, pushing the limits of both alpha strength and moonshade technique. "It's finished," Lila whispered, her pale blue eyes meeting his ice-blue gaze with weary triumph. "I can sense no remnants, no lingering connection. The shadow cord is truly gone." Thorn gathered her closer, his arms providing physical support as their bond hummed with shared accomplishment and relief. "You faced it directly, took its attack meant for me. As you would have done for me, Lila replied simply. That's what mates do, protect each other, strengthen each other, face darkness together rather than alone. Around them, pack members moved forward cautiously, examining the clearing for any remaining threat. Where Richard's body had collapsed remained only a fine ash that would be collected and returned to Redwood territory with appropriate ceremony. The loss was tragic, yet unavoidable given how completely the Shadow Cord had integrated with its host before their intervention. Caleb approached with news that Redwood forces had withdrawn from Ironwood borders following Richard's disappearance, suggesting the compulsion controlling them had dissolved with the Shadow Cord's destruction. Diplomatic challenges remained, particularly explaining Richard's fate to his pack, but those concerns belonged to tomorrow. Tonight had witnessed the end of a shadow that had darkened wolf societies for generations, an accomplishment worth honoring before addressing the complex aftermath. As dawn approached, Lila stood with Thorn on the balcony where they had observed the Shadow Cord's approach hours earlier. The children slept peacefully inside, finally released from the secure chamber once the threat had passed completely. Eveline and the northern delegation had begun preparations to return home, though with promises of continued contact and training for newly identified moonshades within Ironwood territory. "What happens now?" Lila asked, watching the first golden light touch the eastern horizon. Without the Shadow Cord's influence, without the Black Vein Council's manipulation, so many aspects of pack life will change. "We rebuild," Thorn replied, his arms secure around her waist. "Not just structures or alliances, but understanding itself. Packs throughout the region will need to re-examine histories, traditions, governance, separating authentic wolf culture from the Shadow Cord's introduced distortions." Lila nodded, recognizing the enormity of the task ahead. "And the children? How do we explain what's happened, what it means for their future?" "With honesty appropriate to their age," Thorn suggested. "They've already shown remarkable resilience through everything they've experienced. This represents hope rather than further trauma, a world where they can develop naturally without spiritual bindings or manipulations, where both alpha strength and moonshade sensitivity are valued rather than placed in artificial opposition." The rising sun illuminated Ironwood territory in transformative light, emphasizing renewal rather than destruction. Though challenges awaited, diplomatic reconciliation with Redwood Pack, identification and training of latent moonshades, restructuring governance without the Council's influence, the fundamental threat had ended. The Shadow Cord's millennia of manipulation had concluded beneath the sacred oak, freeing wolf societies to evolve without its parasitic guidance. "My grandmother's prophecy," Lila mused, "about the white wolf bringing either salvation or destruction. I think I understand it now. The Shadow Cord feared moonshades because we represented both possibilities, either its destruction, as happened tonight, or the salvation of its methods through becoming its ultimate host." "The prophecy fulfilled through choice rather than destiny," Thorn agreed. "Your choice to emerge from hiding, to trust despite rejection, to heal rather than harm. Our choice to complete the bond despite everything standing against it." He turned Lila to face him, his ice-blue eyes reflecting the morning light as he added, "Choices we continue making each day, not just for ourselves or our children, but for all those who come after us. The legacy of our bond extends far beyond ourselves." Lila reached up to touch his face, the mate bond between them humming with shared purpose and deepening connection. From invisible Omega to Luna, from rejected mate to perfect partner, her journey had transformed not just her own life, but the future of wolf society itself. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together, Alpha and Luna, bound by choice and blessed by the moon goddess, whose ancient wisdom had created the true mate bond that ultimately freed them all. As the sun rose fully over Ironwood territory, its light fell upon a pack forever changed, standing at the threshold of possibility, ready to write new histories untainted by shadow.